Job interviews, career and life advice from just about everybody. Hello there yet again. This is Mike Barrett here along with my brother Patrick, as always.
That's me.
Well, I mean, I'm not like always with him, but
As I am always with him.
When you hear us,
Yeah.
I'm with him.
Or as you know, we're always together.
Exactly. So anyway,
your phone. Yeah.
So here, as per usual, with my brother Patrick. And today we have an interview for you with our accountant. But accountant is sort of a small word. Like, it doesn't really give the idea of the full scope.
There's a lot more going on in this episode than just accounting. Yeah.
Right. So we thought we were going to be learning a little bit about accounting and businesses and administration and that kind of stuff. We did, for sure. And even if you're not someone who feels like they're into that, it is still a very useful,
practical information.
Absolutely. Things that will absolutely make later parts of your life a lot easier, whether you're an employee or a business owner or just, anyone who really pays taxes or ever owns anything or makes any money in any kind of way, like some information.
If your life will be connected to money in any fashion, this might be real.
Yeah. So very useful information from that standpoint. And I think even if right now you don't think you would want a career in any kind of accounting or financial consulting or any kind of thing like that, if you listen to this interview, there's a good chance.
There's some unexpected stuff.
Yeah, you'll become aware of some aspects of that field that you probably don't already know about, and things that would, I think, be interesting to a lot of people, but that a lot of people, again, never actually find out about it. So we do talk about those things. We also talk about Bree's family life and challenges, that she had to overcome with respect to some of those things. We talk about how she
at like high school age, mostly high school age, and then early 20s, that kind of period of life.
And also talking about how she felt like she wasn't a good student and, the sorts of challenges that arose from that. Bree, as it turns out, was a high school dropout, which we didn't know when we started.
Well, we did not. Yeah.
Right. And certainly we're not advocating that you become a high school dropout, but it's very interesting, to hear sort of how she became a professional person after that.
Yeah, this interview definitely involves a lot of, maybe chaos is the word, like unexpected results, twists and turns. And we definitely are not putting it out there as we're not saying you should seek out chaos in your life.
Bree herself would also say, like, exactly what I did.
Yeah, but it's just such a great example of someone who encountered that and then reacted to it well.
Yeah.
And
I would probably go as far as to bet that if you were to speak to, 50 adults that you consider to be like successful and well-settled people, at least 10 to 20, maybe even 30 or 40 of them have lives not as perhaps varied and twisty-turny as this one, but closer to this than
more than you would think. Yeah, this was a really awesome interview too, because it's funny. I don't know if this is the sort of thing everybody feels, or if it's more
just you.
Yeah, just me alone in the universe. Yeah, exactly. But for me, it's so often I just like, you're out in the world, you kind of observe people doing something and you kind of think like, what is that person's deal? Like if I can sit down and talk to that person for a while, like how'd they get here or whatever. And I've always had the sense of like, I bet the people who seem either on paper or whatever, like they might be not like boring people, but like that their story isn't super exciting.
Sure.
I bet a lot of those people have some surprises up their sleeves. Yeah. And this just totally validated that. Yeah. This is like exactly that. So I was really
a piece of evidence.
Yeah. Aha. I was right that whole time. So, this was definitely very informative, just touching on a lot of things, not just accounting.
Right. Yeah. Hijacking shipments of copper.
There's like almost scenes from action movies, like not quite, but, in that ballpark for sure.
Yeah. So a lot of, I think, very actionable things and just sort of also useful background information, really, no matter what your professional plans are later in life.
And we do, another thing, we don't get deep into people's personal lives growing up in every interview, but it's definitely relevant in some of them. And it was certainly relevant in this one. And I think that's a really valuable thing as well, because you almost can't get into the story of somebody's professional life or their educational life without getting wrapped up in what was going on personally, because
where'd they come from?
Yeah, we kind of plan these things and learn about them usually as like separate silos, of like your career.
You mean like education, we as
society? That's how they're normally approached, but in real life they're not like that. And the things that you do, the decisions you make, and the situations that you end up in, they're going to be inextricably like connected to what's going on with you at that moment. And there's a lot of that going on here. And it's easy, or it's understandable as a high school student or as someone in college, someone kind of looking to get into the job force or whatever, to think, oh, well, it'd be great to be able to do that, but I have X, Y, and Z going on. Like, how am I going to do that? And that is super valid, very often.
Absolutely.
It's not a question of it's valid or not, but it can be really useful to hear from someone who definitely has a lot going on and to see what did they do and how do they eventually get, somewhere where a lot of people would be pretty happy to be. So,
yeah. And again, not to like get into too many specifics before the interview, but one of the things that I find the most interesting and positive about what Brie described is that the key skills that sort of helped her succeed and helped her pull her path together through life, they're things that anyone can do. They're things that don't cost money.
Yeah.
It really is all about like mindset and taking specific kinds of actions and
being determined to get through whatever it is you're facing.
Free. So. And to some extent, you can do that no matter what your background is or no matter, what other things you might have going on. It can be harder to put it into practice for sure. I'm not minimizing those kinds of struggles, but
from the perspective of what can I do to help?
It's not like
you can never ensure anything in the future, really, but to help put myself in the best position to do well and to move forward and whatever, you can be determined that you're gonna have this approach that we will learn about in a moment.
As always, we have over introduced the
I think they want to hear more from us.
So without further ado,
we're just so excited to talk about it. All right, here comes our interview with our accountant. Did you know that approaching the math section of the SAT or the ACT like you would approach a test in your math class is likely to hurt your score on test day? SAT and ACT math questions tend to ask about relatively simple math ideas in unfamiliar ways, which means reading each question carefully and avoiding small mistakes is much more important on standardized tests than it is on classroom tests. To find out more, look for our SAT Prep Black Book 2nd edition and our ACT Prep Black Book 2nd edition on Amazon.com. Okay, we are here today with Brianna Bond, who happens to be our accountant. And I don't know if you would like to just, in your own words, tell us what your job is.
Hi, guys. I know we've been sitting here for 30 minutes already, but hi.
We have.
Anyway.
Hi. Officially hi. Yeah.
Brianna gave us those like glass Starbucks latte things that are kind of expensive.
They're frappuccino.
These guys are jacked. They're just
She offered them. Like
usually we're super low energy.
Offered the other stuff.
Not this time.
Yeah,
anyways,
nice.
So I run Ledger. I've been doing that for 10 years now. It was under a different name before.
So what is that? Can you describe what Ledger is, what it does?
Really
well, actually, can you, for our audience who may not be familiar with the term ledger, just in an accounting context in general.
Oh, yeah.
Could you describe what a ledger is like generally? What your
assume that we don't know anything.
It's a clever take on how accounting used to be done in the olden days, which was literally on paper, and you would enter the money in and the money out, and that was it. That was your books.
And you would do that sitting on a ledge, right? You were the
and then at some point, when your business is going really bad, you're gone. So that.
So the ledger was the like physical document.
It is a book. Yeah, it's just a book of, and that was where the term books came from.
No way.
Yeah, shockingly.
Yeah.
So you see these like mafia movies, and they're like scribbling in the books. That was how it was.
Or cooking the books. That's
right. They're cooking the books.
They used to actually cook books.
Yeah.
No, they didn't. So your company named after the. I guess there's no version of that, just software now. Like
it's all just software.
Replacing the ledger. Yeah. So and then how would you describe what your company does?
So I would say that we do anything that touches the finance part of a business. So we don't do any personal finance. So it's all business, bookkeeping, AP, AR, payroll stuff.
AP and AR.
So accounts receivable or accounts payable. Accounts receivable would be when you're billing your clients. So we do a lot of that for our clients, just helping them manage the ongoing stuff, getting the invoice out, making sure it gets paid, going ham on people when they don't pay it, that kind of stuff. But nicely going ham.
Going ham.
And then accounts payable, managing their bills for them to make sure that they get paid. And
I would really love for us to get in a situation with you where we got to watch you go
ham. Yeah, that would.
Yeah, problem with retail kind of businesses. I don't have that kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kind
They've
of
never
bummer.
needed to go ham on someone.
All that working out for nothing. So is this, if we had 15-year-old you here, is this what you thought you'd be doing
Oh, no.
for a career?
Absolutely not. I was trying to think of this because I wanted to kind of be prepared for a question like that, but I was not a good teenager, So
Well, that's super interesting. So I will be open and honest here. Until I met you, I didn't know that I had a stereotype about accountants.
Yeah.
But I did.
No. It was so deeply ingrained. Like, no, that actually is accountants. It's not my fault.
Yeah. And I had known other accountants. Yeah. And they kind of fit the stereotype that I thought. Yeah, but again, that I didn't consciously have, but I did have.
Yeah. No, I get that a lot.
You don't say.
Oh, are you a tattoo artist or,
right.
Or are you in a band?
In my spare time.
Generally, and again, I'm kind of stating things that may be obvious to us, but our audience probably maybe is not familiar with. Although there are an increasingly large number.
There we go.
Of our clients who have mentioned that they have like some kind of small business thing they tried to do, or like a food truck they started over a summer, some kind of thing like that, which is cool. Anyway, so I just sort of always assumed that accountants were like just sort of globally, universally people who had sort of always been good teenagers, good adults. Like, good, it just feels like
fit with like
it feels like it goes with the
almost
mindset.
like a teacher's pet,
you would
like
have to
academic kind of
making sure everything is done properly,
like very straight laced.
If you ever watched the show Parks and Rec, there's even like a huge joke about that. One of the characters works for an accounting firm whose clients are other accounting firms. And
he's like an accountant for an accountant.
Yeah, like the most like
they're like the nerdiest,
right?
I got one of those clients last year. It was like the best day ever. Like I get to be an accountant for an accountant.
Well, so I would like if you could. Can you explain to us? It doesn't even have to be like what you thought you were going to be when you were 15, but can you sort of track for us when you decided to pursue this? Was it a shock to you? Was it as shocking to you?
Yeah.
This as it is?
I mean, how much time do we have? Because my path is long and
we
winding.
have a long time.
Please, and that's kind of the whole
scheduled
point,
an extra chunk of time.
Never foreseen this. However, once I started doing it, I was like, okay, this fits my personality. I've always been a very analytical person. So
and how did you start? Like, were you just walking down the street and there was some books, a ledger? And you're like, hey, and he just kind of
someone's got to handle this.
This is the craziest thing. I worked for a company that did repossessions on semi-trucks.
Going ham.
Right.
Wow. Super ham on a semi-truck.
So I was a repo agent for semi-trucks because
what age was this? Like timeline wise, where are we? Right
this was, how old am I? 36. So I was like 25. And I would go out across the country and get these trucks back. And these are
by
really
yourself?
large assets. Yeah.
Do you have like a superhero mobile? Like how do you hop in a car and like drive to wherever this
so there's like a lot of research up front. Like I got to figure out.
Like you're like Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yes.
For trucks.
For trucks, yeah. And like these are really big assets. A lot of people don't know those trucks are very expensive.
Super expensive.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a whole other.
The long haul truck drivers, these trucks could be anywhere in the nation.
Whoa.
And so
why didn't we just keep doing that forever?
It was so awesome. It was really fun, but then then I got pregnant and I couldn't be like pregnant Dog the Bounty Hunter. That's just too cliche.
Well, could you? Like you kind of have more leverage in that situation? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, I got enough going on here.
Yeah.
Give me your truck.
Like, I can't just
I have to say, if I'm putting myself in just like I'm imagining that I own a long haul truck.
You're not making your payments.
Paying on it. It's getting repossessed. And the person repossessing it is visibly pregnant. I would be like, yeah, okay, go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, but maybe this will work.
It was just like, I gotta stop. I gotta.
Right.
So then I just started getting on the flip side of that is that we leased the trucks out as well. So I would started on kind of doing the accounting for that and a little bit the sales, but mostly just the amortization and all that.
They didn't have an accountant up to that point. They were doing it themselves.
Yeah.
They just said,
the CFO was doing it, but
this is one of those things, and this has happened, by the way, in every podcast so far. Like you just said a sentence that has caused me to have like 5 simultaneous questions. I'm not going to be able to get to them. And I'm trying to pick like which one. Yeah. So sales, who are you selling the skill of truck repossession to?
No, we're selling the trucks.
We trained Dog in hours.
I was like, wow, that's a market I never. So you would repossess the trucks, and then the truck needs to be sold, and that's to recover the money that was
right. And because their use life is insane, so
you only sold trucks that you had repossessed. You didn't have like a truck.
Well, we would buy them. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Right. We would just buy a few. We didn't like huge.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 trucks.
So 20 trucks
at a time you would have, or like total ever?
At a time.
Oh, that seems.
And was this?
But I guess
Was this like a family business? Did you answer an
It was not my family business, but it was a small family business, and this was my like year 3 with this company, and they actually had a holding company and then 3 different arms. One where they built houses, random, this equipment financing arm, and then transportation brokerage, which I've worked in all 3 of their arms. So
wow.
this is what it's at. I don't know how much time you have. This was the step right before I just became an accountant. So I ended up doing this part of it. And then I started taking over the QuickBooks. I'm going to shorten this part into, this is like a 6-month span, but my mom got sick.
Okay.
And I was in Arizona. My mom was in Maryland. My sister, who lived with my mom, was still a teenager. And it was like, you need to move out here. Like, you might own a teenager soon.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
So I moved out to Maryland, and the company, like, it wasn't work I could do remotely. So after I kind of spooled down with them, I started doing bookkeeping, like through Craigslist. Like,
using
I just
the
need
skill
money.
set that you developed.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, I need money, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I went to school part-time in Maryland while taking care of my mom and sister. And
so this
doing
is
accounting.
You have a baby at this point because you had your
I have 2 kids. Yeah.
wow.
Wow. So
around the time that you were pregnant, because you mentioned it seemed like there's 2 factors that went into you leaving this, because you said you're pregnant. It was kind of that was why you stopped the repo part, and that's when you moved into more of the accounting.
Right.
Was it sort of like general administrative stuff with a focus on accounting?
Yeah, I think that's
sort of like
fair.
yeah.
Riding a desk.
Yeah. Huh.
riding
Okay.
a desk, is that a thing people say when they?
That is a thing. Have you heard that? Like, you turn in your badge, you're riding the desk.
You're either riding the truck or you're riding the desk. You picked, or you're riding the house if you're in the house riding on.
It's the verb we use. Right. So you left the repo arm. You were now
Just general,
riding a
like,
desk, and then this development happened with your family,
Right.
where you decided that you
Moved across the country, and so I was in school, but I also needed money because I didn't have a scholarship to like have extra money. So I was working part-time as an accountant for a nonprofit childcare agency that was run by the county.
Wow.
This was, you said, like you were answering ads. Is that how you ended up with that?
Yeah.
Okay. When you say you're answering ads, these were like kind of short-term gigs, or are they like side jobs? You do
they were like just part-time. Yeah.
From one to the next.
So if they would advertise part-time, I work pretty efficiently, and I've always known that about myself. So they're like, it's 20 hours a week. I'm like, no, it's not. It's 10 hours a week. So I could take that and probably have 2, but I was also going to school, which is, I was going to nursing school. I thought that was going to happen.
Wow.
But
So
then I just started making too much money doing bookkeeping.
You were going to nursing school, viewing accounting basically as like a side hustle.
Yeah.
And then
taking care of your mom.
The accounting kind of took over
sister
in a financial sense.
Right. Yeah, it took over.
Good job. That's a lot of
nicely done.
I thrive on chaos.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you found yourself in the middle of some.
Yeah.
So I just gave up school. Like, I did fine in school. While I was a bad teenager, I'm really good academically. I get bored with it, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's why I did horrible in high school. I did horrible.
Interesting.
Definitely want to talk about
lots of questions.
Everything.
There. Okay, so accounting figures heavily. Okay, so nursing, was there something that led you to think, okay, I should do nursing?
Yeah, why nursing?
I mean, I see a million
as opposed to
like,
I really like gore. Like, I'm.
Say that again.
She likes gore.
Yeah.
That's what I thought she said.
Like, the more disgusting it is, like, I want to be in that.
Did you see it when you were going ham on people? There was like a little gore, but not enough.
Well, when I lived in Baltimore, I did some volunteer EMT work. And it was so fun, but they don't pay anything. So I was like, how can I expound upon that?
Volunteer EMT.
Did you also like helping people or just gore?
I mean, that's... Sure. It's a nice bonus.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, if you like gore, there's many darker paths you could have gone.
That's
right.
true.
I could. I'm helping people, but also it's fast paced, which I thrive on chaos.
And the problem solving,
that.
analytical.
I'm never going to be bored.
Yeah.
I'm always solving a problem. It's really fun.
Do you get much gore now that you're in the accounting world, or you need to get a fix?
It's not the same kind. It's like IRS gore.
Yeah.
Which, like, the most exciting day I had was like writing an angry letter. Yeah.
Do you like spill blood on it or something?
Yeah. Which is kind of fun. I mean, the threats are still there. They're just more like finely worded.
It's more like, I gotcha.
Right.
Yeah. There's like a subtlety.
There's like there's an art to it. Yeah.
Huh. I never would have seen the connection between angry repo person.
Yes.
This is why I have fun with it when people hire me to do collections. Like, if I have a bad day,
You have like
I have this outlet there.
it's almost like a gym you belong to.
Yeah.
For, emotional purposes.
So did you do the volunteer EMT work before you decided to try nursing, or were they kind of simultaneous, or did nursing?
I did do it before, but I also continued doing it while I was in school. So I was really busy.
How long did you stick with nursing stuff before?
Only 1 year.
Okay.
And then I was just like, this isn't going to, I was
kinda
already,
realized,
26 at that point. It's like, I'm going to do this for another 6 years. No, I'm not starting that late. I'm not doing it.
What is the training that long?
I mean, you got to get your 4 years and then it's pretty
Wow.
long. And at my speed, because I had kids and like,
You're doing a whole bunch of stuff at once.
I couldn't dedicate myself.
Had you gone to college before that, or this was like you didn't go to college? You did the
I
the
didn't.
writing.
I am a high school dropout.
Wow.
I
No
never,
way.
I never
Okay.
even got my GED.
So the formal training post high school, which, as you said, you didn't even finish high school. The only formal training you had was this 1 year in nursing school. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Cool. So cool. Awesome.
You're like, and you're fired. Bye.
Do you know any local accountants we can talk? So
I have to say this, like, I feel like you should lead with this.
You should.
Like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. You would have
the truck repo thing. That's like an action
awesome.
hero. This is cool. So, because I thought that you don't need to have like a degree to be an accountant. Is there a certification you have to get? Like, how does that work?
So you do have to, in order to be a CPA, you do need to take the Beckett exam, which in order to take the Beckett exam, you have to have an accounting degree. So there is that, but I'm not a CPA.
So CPAs have to go that route. That's required.
Yes.
So you have to before.
That's why you get the fancy title.
There you go.
You paid for it.
Okay. So I know you just said this, but just so I'm clear and our listeners are, so to be a CPA, guaranteed you have to get a 4-year degree, like and major in accounting, or is that?
I'm pretty sure.
Stupid question. Okay. I didn't know if it was like more than one.
I mean, there's like forensic accounting. There's
some version of it. It's kind of like, I believe, like law school, right? You have to graduate from law school to even be able to take the bar in most cases.
In most places now, it didn't used to be like that. And I've read actually that a couple of states are no longer that way. But now,
that's
like
my
when
next
I was
plan,
doing it,
but-
that was what you had to do. Say again,
I'm going to go take the bar exam as my next career plan.
Do it.
Just to see.
We'll do part 2 of So, and then, but accounting for businesses, as you just said,
Right. It's more.
Is there any certification you have to get, or it's more just familiarity?
There's not.
with
I
the
mean, it's
software,
familiarity with the softwares, I guess, that are available, although that changes too. And that's something that can be trained really easily. It's just the principle of accounting. I did take accounting classes. I didn't get a degree in it.
like at a community college,
yeah.
or
Right.
Okay.
It was like one of the prereqs of when I had the repo job, they sent me to accounting classes.
Really?
So you would know, like, by the book, what you could and couldn't do, or what their situation was. That makes sense.
Wow. Did you ever have a time when you repossessed something that you should not have? Like someone made a mistake?
Accidentally or something?
Yeah, no, I don't mean like the wrong car.
I think it's just theft.
Yeah. That you were told
there was some mistake.
This person's behind, but they actually weren't. Or
no. I mean, because we owned all the trucks too, so we knew. I mean, there were times where you repoed things where you just generally felt bad about it. Like, I know you can't pay your bill, but
this is also it's
also ours. And we're paying for it, so it is like sometimes morally rough. To do.
Sure. Wow. Well, I imagine the economics of this have changed, and I don't know if it's something that you're familiar with or not, but at that time for a truck driver, like what sort of was the business model? What did they do?
You get paid per mile. See, I think the rate back then was not a lot, and it depended on what you're hauling and what type of truck you have. So I also was at some point before this the director of operations for the brokerage arm. So I know way too much about this.
Wow.
But like if you're hauling refrigerated goods, if you're a flatbed, if it's copper, which is like, if you're hauling copper, there's a good chance you get hijacked on the side of the road. Whoa. So there's like a whole bunch of factors, but it's just per mile. And that's why nobody ever tries to drive empty, because it's just money.
You just waste it.
Sure.
Money. Yeah.
Wow. So also director of operations. Can you sort of describe for our listeners what that means in kind of a concrete sense in that company at that time?
That meant managing 25 transportation brokers all over the country and everything that came with that, getting all their vendors approved, the truck drivers themselves,
managing transportation brokers, is that a fancy term for the actual drivers, or these people?
No. So transportation brokers develop relationships with drivers and customers who need things shipped.
So something for our listeners to understand, and please correct me if this is not totally accurate in this context, but this idea of brokers has actually come up a couple of times before, and we've never fully explored it. And just to help everybody understand, again, tell me if I'm wrong here, but generally what a broker does sort of is acting as a middleman. If you have a business where there's someone who needs to buy a lot of stuff, in this case, a lot of drivers, they need to hire those people, or they need to buy a lot of food, or they need to buy a lot of whatever, and they don't really have the time to deal with the potentially thousands or millions of options that they could choose to buy from. Instead, these like brokers will spring up kind of in the middle. And what the broker does is kind of goes out and, to use a modern term, the broker kind of curates good vendors, good sources of whatever raw materials or whatever it is, like in that industry. And the broker also develops relationships with the person who needs to do like a lot of buying or a lot of hiring or a lot of whatever. And so that way, your company, the company at the top of this chain, basically, instead of having to know a million different vendors who are coming and going, only has to know like a dozen or 25 brokers, and then the brokers do the job of.
That's exactly right. And you take a cut off the top. It's like old fashioned LinkedIn. Like
sure. And I think I don't know this industry in particular, but also for our audience, I think that as time goes by and the internet becomes even more and more of a thing, and it becomes possible actually for the people at the very bottom to deal directly with the people at the very top, then the role of brokers is either evolving or in some cases going away completely. Is that?
I mean, I've been out of it for quite a while, but I would imagine that's the case. And you see things like, I have clients who do retail and they need to order 12,000 items from China. And instead of having a broker like you would have to do, you get on Alibaba and you find the person.
Right.
You know?
Just do it.
So,
and Alibaba is sort of like Amazon or eBay for manufacturing for large
quantities of things.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry. So you were director of operations. You were dealing with 25 brokers. How old were you when you were doing this?
I was 24.
And what was your...
I started there as the secretary.
Cool.
And you were good at it.
Obviously. I mean, it sounds weird to say, especially on record, but I'm just really good at finding holes, I think, and being good at my job.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing to find. If you guys probably haven't worked anywhere corporate for a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah. But
and it didn't
one thing that you find is you're just like, everybody's so incompetent.
Yeah.
And yet they're all employed.
Right. And I feel like a lot of times incompetence, it's, hard to say, you have to make a generalized statement, I guess, if you want to comment on it. So I don't want to be too generalized. Obviously, this doesn't apply to every single person, but a lot of times it seems more like lack of interest. It's like, It's not like you're trying really hard and you're failing. A lot of times it's like, you don't seem engaged with it. It doesn't seem important to you.
You don't really care.
You're not really.
Yeah.
So I think most people probably in that situation, just a guess, but it seems like it's not like you don't have the skills or the potential to do this well. It's more the decision to be engaged.
And I think a large part of that too, I mean, this is something we really can't address now, I guess, but it's that a lot of people just get whatever job they can get.
Yeah.
And they don't really think about should I try something else or should I,
their boss,
and that kind of leads to that apathy, especially if you're in an organization that's large enough and pays well enough that you don't have to think about, it doesn't matter that
I can apply this much effort and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason, to be clear why I brought that up, I think a lot of our listeners fear failure very much. And they're really worried about it. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, if you're worried that you're not going to be able to get anywhere in a company or whatever, a lot of times the most important thing is like, if you're really dedicated to doing this and it really matters to you and whatever, you can avoid this situation most of the time, most likely, as long as you are committed to really putting in the effort to.
I would agree with that. I mean, I'm not qualified for any job I've ever had. I never was to start, but if you go in and you care and you stay insanely curious, and I think that's something that I still have even at 36. If you just stay crazy curious and you're like, you're just intrigued and you're not afraid to ask questions and say, well, I don't know how to do this, but I can find out.
Yeah. Right. Somebody somewhere knows how to do it.
Someone's doing it.
They learn how to do it.
Especially like the internet didn't exist in this capacity when I was 24 years old.
Yeah,
so with all the resources you have now, you can learn anything. And improve your situation.
You're determined.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
All those jobs are absolutely just like, well, I need a job. So I guess I'm a secretary now.
So you saw an ad online? I mean, what was the process like?
Yeah, I think for that, I mean, it's been a long time, but I think for that job, started as a secretary at this holding company, then worked my way up to director of operations.
What was that over the course of a couple years, or how would you? What was that?
13 months, I think.
Wow, good job. How many people were in this organization?
The holding company employed 40 people, I think.
Cool.
So it was.
What was was it secretary? Right to that? Was there like an interim stop? Like
there was one interim stop, and then the director of operations left, and I took her role.
Huh.
So I was just like, I don't know.
Did you
assistant to the director or something?
By the time that happened, did you know? I don't know. There was like an ownership or the board. Like who decided to move you up to that position, and how did they know you at that point?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Chuck Smith. He knew me as I'm trying to remember names so I can remember.
That name sounds fake.
Yeah, it does sound fake. He's just like the most all-American guy.
Yeah.
He was the president of the brokerage arm, and I was 3 under him at first as a secretary.
Then you elbowed
and then I worked my way up to assistant director under Mary. And then when Mary just found a new opportunity, it was too good to pass up, even though everybody loved this company. It's a great place to work.
Yeah.
I worked directly under Chuck.
So you had kind of proven yourself in the assistant role as like
it's something I think about.
Choice of this person.
Something I think about a lot, like when I'm feeling down about whatever way work is going, is what Chuck said when he like picked me for the spot. He's like, my favorite thing about you is not that you pretend to know everything. You don't. It's that you say, I don't know, but I can find out. And like, if you just keep doing that, it takes a lot to admit, I don't know.
I think people, especially, it's funny because you mentioned you're a bad teenager and you're bad academically. I feel like a lot of people who are very stereotypically good academically, very dedicated to that, are very scared to ever say, I don't know something. You kind of like feel like you always have to project this image that you are competent or whatever, or fully versed on what's going on. And then you have this fear of saying, well, actually, I missed this thing from a week ago that I should have known now. I'm terrified. I'm just going to fake it and act like, and you're internally freaking out or whatever. Right. But it seems like this is a very good skill that doesn't seem to be taught or rewarded.
It doesn't. But I mean,
admitting, I don't know this.
If you're in a place where you're pretending like you know everything, that's kind of admitting to the world there's nowhere else for you to go. And like, who wants to do that? That's really kind of boring.
Yeah.
So
that was, I forget who it was. Someone said something, some presentation or something. Only mediocre people are always at their best. It's like kind of thing, And actually, and nothing against mediocre people. We need them too. But not me. Obviously,
you guys out there.
No, but that actually does kind of circle back to something I wanted to ask you about. So you mentioned feeling down about something related to work. Which is something I fully understand.
What is that?
I think anyone does, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you kind of
the highs are higher and the lows are lower.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you address that too? Because again, I think a lot of our audience is sort of strongly encouraged not to feel bad about anything ever.
Yeah,
and I don't think that maybe they understand that it's actually pretty normal as a professional adult to.
It's pretty unavoidable.
Feel down.
It's unavoidable, not only as a professional, but as an entrepreneur. Like everybody's like, "Oh, it's the best." It's gonna... Half of your time is spent like in the dregs of just crushing.
Yeah.
Am I doing anything right?
Yeah. Right. Because there's nobody telling you. You don't wake up in the morning and have a person say, "Today you work on this."
You're right.
You say to yourself, "I guess I should work on this."
On my worst days, I'm just like, I could just go get a job, and somebody would tell me what to do, and I could just go home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like, and I'm like, I want to have the freedom to
and then
go rock climbing on Wednesday mornings. So it's definitely a struggle. I mean, there are highs. You get to do lots of cool things.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody who's like, my job is aces all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Never happy. Well, I feel like we have.
I do actually know one person like that, but
everybody else.
He's exceptional.
We're going to go egg their house.
Exactly. Take him down a peg. I think it feeds into, like you said, this perception of entrepreneurship is like very much romanticized, especially now. And it kind of, in a very negative way feeds into this sort of like Instagram reality where people only share the highlights. They only share like, oh, I'm rock climbing on Wednesday morning. Right. You guys are in office. Yeah. You know? But you don't like people who might share that.
Cut to me like crying.
You know, a person who would share that wouldn't share that. Oh, my number one client just cut me off for no reason. And, you know, now I have to do like there's.
Oh, I just made a sales presentation that did not go very well.
That's what we need. We do need more of that. Although I'm probably guilty of only posting. I don't know if I post anything about it at all, but if I do, it is probably only good stuff.
Well, yeah, most people naturally. That's
just natural.
It's natural to make like an anti.
Yeah,
it's sort of like only for the
like a bad day social media thing. Yeah. You know, I made this huge stupid mistake, and now I gotta,
that's called Reddit. That's what that is.
Yeah, and that's why it's anonymous. Yeah,
right. Yeah. I mean, it's just a constant up and down. Like you have a good day, you're like, I just shipped a huge proposal, and they were all about it. Yeah. And then it's like, oh God. But then what? What if they say yes?
Next? Right. What if they say yes?
Do it. Yeah.
So yeah.
What do you think is the single most important resource for test preparation? Well, I'd love to say that the most important resources are our black books or our video courses, but that isn't actually true. There's actually something even more important than those resources, which is a set of official test questions to practice with, published by the same company that makes whatever test you're prepping for. So for the SAT, that means you should work with official questions written by the College Board. And for the ACT, that would mean you should work with official questions written by ACT Inc. If you don't know why it's so important to practice only with real practice questions from the test maker, then you're probably missing out on the most important idea in test preparation. To learn more about that crucial idea, keep listening for the special segment at the end of this episode. And for more on the SAT and ACT, head over to questprep.com or search for the SAT Prep Black Book or the ACT Prep Black Book on Amazon.com.
When you were talking before, kind of taking us back to doing nursing school and doing sort of on-the-side accounting and then eventually deciding that the accounting was the better thing to do, at that time, I guess you could sort of say like around there is when you switched from being an employee in your own mind to an entrepreneur, like standing on your own.
I mean, I don't think it was a conscious decision.
That was what I was going to get.
Like a necessity.
It was like, well, I'm taking a few part-time contracting things and maybe one of them will hire me full-time, but that never happened. And I just kept accruing clients and all of a sudden I've got a company. Like, I don't know how that happened. I really don't. It was never a plan. Some people had into this with the plan. And
so you kind of found yourself with, I have these clients. Right. I'm kind of by default like an independent accounting agency.
I better get an LLC. Like, So I just had at the time, this sounds stupid to say, but a pretty large Twitter following, and
for unrelated reasons. Just cause?
Yeah.
Just the way people somehow get a following.
I was like, I don't know if you guys know, but I'm kind of funny.
Okay.
And I guess I was funny on
obviously.
Twitter. And,
on Twitter,
you know, when you were
just the best kind of funny to be in 2019.
Right. Right. But that was in like 2008.
Ooh.
Okay.
Like I'm an OG Twitter.
So you were funny on Twitter
back when Twitter was great.
To be.
Back when Twitter was just everybody making jokes and not just screaming about politics all the time.
Yeah.
So I gained a pretty good following. And then if you just talk about your work, like, hey, that's the girl who does taxes, by the way.
Yeah.
So it just became overwhelming.
And so you could, or correct me if I'm wrong, could you, I guess is a better way to phrase this, could you take clients from anywhere? Did they have to be American, like for legalities? Or
I should stick to U.S. accounting just because
that's your
I can barely like keep up with the U.S. tax laws.
Like as they evolve.
Right. There's so much and knowing everywhere else is just a lot.
Sure.
So if you were motivated to do that, you could practically do it. It's just you have to take on a whole bunch of
right.
And that's another thing for our audience, like is this question of jurisdictions basically, or geographical areas where the laws are a certain way. They might be different by state for some professions, different by county for other professions, different by country. And so to be a good professional provider of the service, you have to know basically what the rules and customs are like in a place.
Right.
And that's why, for example, like a doctor or a lawyer might be licensed in some states and not in others or whatever. So again, I'm just sort of explaining that to everyone. So, but you didn't need to worry about that as long as they were dealing with U.S. As long as they were dealing with U.S. tax situations and tax or accounting financial situations. That was
same broad rules or what you're working.
That was my.
And so you could like with your Twitter following, you could just attract people from.
Yeah, that was pretty much the start of my entire business.
So just just to be clear, you had the realization, wait a minute, I have all these clients. I'm basically like my own, accounting agency or whatever. Then you consciously said, well, I might as well let my Twitter people that I already have know that I'm doing this? Or was it kind of like the Twitter people found out and came to you? And
that was it. It was more like ranting about IRS forms in an offhand and funny way. And they're like, well, she does taxes, even though it makes her angry. I guess I'll go see if I should do my taxes.
So you were able to kind of like kickstart your business a little just because you had been tweeting a lot?
Yes.
And tweeting
it's ridiculous.
That is fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I never advertised. I just yelled on Twitter. That's it.
Oh.
Do you think, given how Twitter has evolved in those 10 or 11 years, do you think you could do the same thing now, starting
or like a person could do that? Or what do you think that would be like? Or do you have any?
Do you think one could do it? Yeah, not you, but it could.
This is a very loaded question because I think you have to have a lot of friends. I am fortunate enough to know people who have much larger Twitter followings than I do. And I don't know how much that factored in back then, but it would certainly factor in now.
Sure.
And also you just kind of have to have a personality
that fits that sort of
people don't
channel. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
a very casual channel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The good thing about talking about taxes on Twitter is that everybody hates taxes.
That's true.
So there's nothing to argue about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that you kind of kept it like strictly on the topic.
The lighter sort of.
Yeah. I just keep it light. Let's just yell about taxes together. This is ridiculous. There's a great tweet out there, actually, this is not relevant to any questions, but it's so good. It's like the government knows what you make,
right,
knows how much you should report, and then makes you guess, and then puts you in jail.
If you don't
The
system could be.
Right. We could improve this.
It's like a conversation between the government and a guy, right?
Right.
Yeah. You know what I make? Yeah. Yeah. So is Twitter still a significant part of your life or your time or anything? Or is that kind of a bygone chapter for now? Or?
I mean, it can be entertaining to me. And if you cultivate it really well, you can kind of skip the things that are depressing.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that for me, I ditched Facebook for a long time for like 7 years because it just got to be so much noise.
Do you hear that saying, Twitter makes me fall in love with strangers and Facebook makes me hate people I've never met.
Yes. That was so true. And Twitter back in 2008, 2009 was so good. Some of my best friends or, people I met on Twitter.
Really?
That's awesome.
Is your current relationship or non-relationship with Twitter, you just sort of lost interest or you got busy with other stuff or it just kind of happened?
Like, I don't have time to spend on it anymore.
Yeah,
sure.
Really. That's probably the most of it.
Do you remember a specific moment, day, whatever, when you thought of yourself as an entrepreneur for the first time, or you thought of yourself as standing on your own without, not maybe one day I'll find another job or, well, it sounds like from what you said before,
literally
some days we do still fantasize about someone, but when you said, okay, like this is what I do now.
This is a very practical answer that you'll probably expect from an accountant. But when I started looking for, I was so deep in just I don't want to deal with this anymore, that I actually started looking for jobs and realized I priced myself out of a market.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it was more lucrative to work with 30 clients at a reduced rate than one client at a full rate. I was like, well, I'm stuck here.
Yeah. I can't really justify making this move.
I can't do it. So now I've got to go all in. So that was
that interesting.
So you remember kind of that moment or that point where you was that?
I mean,
you said Ledger's been around for 10 years. Was that the start of the 10 years when you're like, all right, or were you already a few years?
Oh, no. Well, no, I didn't make a lot because I didn't actually, Ledger's been around for 10 years, but for the first 5 years, I didn't focus on it. It was kind of a side hustle. I also owned part of a web development agency.
Part of a what?
Web development agency.
Got it. Yeah.
So I spent.
Is there anything that you don't do?
No, I will do literally anything for money.
Every 5 minutes. Literally. I also did this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we started this talk when I was 23, so I still have 16 to 23 we're not even going to get into.
Awesome.
So web development. So you said at that point, the accounting was like a side hustle.
It was like 50-50.
So they were both side hustles kind of.
Yeah, I was splitting my time between.
Did you have clients, did you have some clients who were clients of both things or?
I did not. The web development agency had a much higher ticket client base. We worked for Adobe.
Sorry, when you say
Harvard.
higher ticket, you mean that each job brought in more money?
Oh yeah, and they were just bigger name. And my accounting agency has always kind of serviced smaller businesses by design. I like it, that way, but it's just totally different client base. Adobe doesn't need me to be their part-time accountant.
Sure.
So.
Was there a reason, it seems like you had these two things you said were 50-50 and it seems like now you're exclusively focused on?
I am exclusively focused on that. I sold my portion.
Okay. So were you looking to get out of that or the opportunity?
Yeah, it was fun, but I would just reach a point where like I could go no further because I'm not a developer and my project management skills were tapped out.
So was that the role that you played?
Yeah.
You managed. Okay.
Business development and project management.
Could you describe for our audience what project management is? Kind of, it's a very big thing, but it's just a sort of, if you've never heard the phrase before.
It is herding cats with like a fancy title.
Herding, H-E-R-D.
Herding, H-E-R-D.
Writing cats.
I mean,
to get so much more.
Yeah. So it's basically dealing with the people who are doing the work, like the developers we had, and the client translating, because developers often not great at client management themselves. So you're acting as a barrier between them and kind of translating what needs to get done on the timeline it needs to get done and all this fun stuff.
Sounds like kind of like the broker role we described earlier, where you're between
more or less,
the person who has the money and the person who has the
except that the project manager and the worker
are on the same
developer
company.
Would all be on the same company. Right. And then,
So how did you come to do that? How did that
if
start?
you're not a developer.
Yeah. So my ex was a developer and he was kind of a freelancer. And then when we were together, I was like, well, you got to stop selling your time. You're out of time. You're kind of income capped. Let's see if we can turn this into an agency. And we did. It took 3 years. And then I sold out my portion and he stayed on for 2 more years and then sold out his portion.
Okay. So
is there a third partner or somebody else came along?
We did. After a while, we brought in a partner and then now he owns it all himself.
Wow.
And that's still going on.
Yeah.
That company still exists. Do you ever wish you stayed with it or anything? Or was it the right move to make still?
Not really. I mean, they're doing great. So sure, I guess from a baller status, it would have been. But mostly I'm just like, this is the person running it is exactly who needs to be running it. He deserves every ounce of success they have. And he's much better at it than I was. So that's again the best possible outcome.
So do you feel like you learned over the course of those years that you could do this, but it wasn't?
Yeah, I think I was okay at it, but it's just like, I don't want to manage your ego. And that's a lot of what a project manager does is because they say, make this logo bigger. And you're like, but it's going to look stupid.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of deal with that.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't have a lot of empathy. So it's not my
in the empathy.
Yeah, I just don't have that. So it was good for me. It was fun, but I'm glad it's not for me.
I think that's an interesting thing too, an interesting aspect of, adulthood for me. I don't know if other people figured this out much earlier than I did, but what you just said about realizing that there's a certain skill set, in this case, project management, that you just don't feel that's your calling or you're like the thing that you were built to do. Are there other sorts of skill sets like that you've run into in your time? Like, for example, with nursing, it doesn't sound like nursing was something that you said, I'm not really good enough at this to devote myself to it. It was more like this other thing over here.
Yeah, it was poor timing. Right.
Right. Have there been, for example, you mentioned that you don't do personal accounting. Is that because you realized you don't really like it? It's not your strong suit, or how do you make those decisions?
Most people's personal finances are much more limited. It's just, I don't want to do your 1040 return and you're making the same W-2 every year. It's just boring. There's nothing exciting about it for me. There's nothing that we can really improve that much unless you're dealing with people who already have independent wealth, in which case I am nowhere near qualified to deal with that.
Right.
So.
Did you have experience in that world?
This better be super insightful.
Like you said, you don't want to just fill out somebody's 1040.
Yeah.
Had you done it, or you had talked to people who had done it?
The first, when I was talking about it, people would say on Twitter, here, do my personal return. So I did it. I've done my fair share of.
So you had some hands-on experience, and it just felt very mechanical.
Just
like you just plug stuff in.
I don't feel like I'm providing any value. You could literally do what I'm doing on TurboTax.com. There's nothing here. I'm putting things on a form.
Yeah.
Right.
And the business
as opposed to using, and that may be something else actually that I would guess a large portion of our audience is unfamiliar with, unless they happen to know an accountant already. There actually is a fair amount of creativity, possible in accounting, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. Because of the complexities.
I didn't really think about this until just now, but maybe we should say clearly, and you can please expand on this and tell me where I'm not exactly right, but it's not that you're doing things that are illegal, which it might seem to someone who's not familiar with how these situations work. It's more that by choosing to move money in at certain dates or times, or by choosing to call a structure a particular under a certain label, then it gets treated one way by tax law versus another
There's
way.
a lot of different paths that your taxes can take, and all of them are going to be legal, but they might have different outcomes.
Right.
Like tax law itself is, I guess, designed in a way that there's all these different options you can make depending on what seems to fit your situation.
Very
and
much
you help people figure all that out, like what's the best way to do that. And as you said, that's more possible with business taxes than what was individual regular people. It's pretty much like
pretty
one path, multiple paths,
more or less.
Yeah. That's another one of those things that just sort of, as you become older and an adult, you sort of realize intuitively, there's a lot of ways you could do someone's taxes that are all perfectly legitimate and have different benefits. But I didn't know that when I was in high school. So I'm imagining
because they don't teach kids in high school about taxes.
That's like one of my goals for 2020 is to teach Hillsborough something about personal finance.
Be cool.
I don't know how to do it. I'm not yet.
So you haven't approached them or anything?
No, I've not yet. I'm like working on. I got to figure out how do you even do that. You know?
That's so cool. How did you?
It's important to me because we didn't learn about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, my parents went through multiple bankruptcies because they probably weren't taught it. And then I only got to learn from watching them, which is like, no.
What not to do.
Well, I only learned what not to do. And like, when I see my son coming in, he like goes to the ATM and he's like, I want $10.73. And I'm just like, I'm an accountant and I'm
basic
failing.
thing missing. Right.
And it's like, that's more important than knowing that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah,
which it is
for most people. Yeah,
for most people,
it's the powerhouse for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but you mean it's more important.
I'm saying absolutely. Like in general, you could make the assumption that for most people, the tax thing is going to be
it's just more
practical life skills.
You need to
like cover the life skills first,
right?
And then if there's different paths you want to go down, that would
give them a head start.
Seem to make more sense.
It is an interesting thing that I've observed across like a lot of the clients and readers and people who reach out to us. Whenever anything related to decisions around money or any kind of thing like that comes up, that we have been sort of privy to, everyone does whatever their parents did because it never occurs to them that there's any other way to do it. Because sort of, let me try that again. It's sort of almost like a family value, even though it's never explicitly said, I think, in a lot of families, but this is how we handle money. We do it this way.
Yeah.
And in most cases, I would guess that is not something that anyone ever consciously thought about and tried to improve.
Yeah.
It's just
because probably what your parents did is what their parents did. And so on. And not just with money, but it's such a natural path to take because it feels so risky to do something different from what you grew up seeing, even if you saw someone do that and have a terrible experience. It could feel like, well, this is
there was actually a really interesting question on Reddit the other day. The question was an explain like I'm 5 question. And the question was like, in direct concrete terms, how does a large corporation avoid paying taxes in the United States?
Like what is, because you hear about that
it comes up a lot, that like Apple or whatever company like offshores stuff.
How does that work and everything?
Yeah. And that's one of those things, if you know how it's done, which I do like roughly abstractly, it never occurs to me that that's not obvious. But of course it's not obvious. Right. A lot of, So how would you consider teaching younger people that? Have you made any kind
I don't know. I mean, I feel like now you're the experts on this, how to teach younger people things.
Well, thanks.
But this is just something that I really want to do. I don't even know if it's viable.
Just
I don't know
observing
if the county
your son, as
does
you said,
this.
just
like, all the kids, his friends come over like, let's go blow $87 on, Skittles at Publix. I'm like, what are you doing?
That does sound awesome.
Is that an actual thing they've done? Because I would like to hang out with it. Okay.
That's a real anecdote.
That happened last weekend. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's just like, I just want you to be better prepared than I was. Like if that's all any parent does is like try to teach them a little bit better than we did, maybe eventually somebody will be okay.
Right.
1,000 years from now, there'll be one kid.
How many Skittles does $87 buy you?
That's a lot of Skittles.
So
much.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're buying the family size because if you're in the little.
And this is, I don't know if you can see in the camera. Obviously, if you're listening, you can't see, but
I know you can't see.
Brianna actually has a.
I do love junk food. Like I love junk food, but
So
$87 is too much.
You can be.
If anything, that money should be invested in a tattoo of the Skittles, which will be.
I thought it would make me like stop eating as much junk food. No, now I'm just reminded all the time.
Why did you think that?
I don't know.
Well, if I'm always looking at a representation,
Yeah, maybe it'll be enough.
Less, right? Yeah. You could have gotten a
Didn't work.
tattoo of like a gross version.
Right.
Of
Oh, no, I
like
mean-
rotting muffins.
Sorry, podcast. We're real people running into the table.
We are, yeah. We'll fix it in post.
So you'll fix it.
I will. Yeah.
Currently
Our
have
sound guy.
for post. A couple of things that I would like to touch on before I do want to talk about the years up to 16 and also a bit about Ledger and software and those kinds of things. But just briefly, you mentioned the phrase forensic accounting, which again, I'm going to guess
My
is
dream
something.
job.
Yeah, me too.
Really?
Yeah.
So, can you please describe for us what forensic accounting is and how it would differ from?
It is for the deep dive stuff where it's like some rich evil person is funneling money offshores and you need to track it. Fun stuff like that.
So
Like,
it's
you're just-
necessarily like criminal in nature. Like you're investigating.
Usually it is, yeah.
And
You're like looking from the outside, right, at what's publicly available,
Right.
and you're
determining
trying to figure out
whether you-
what is this.
You're figuring it out. And also,
organization
if it's even deeper than that, sometimes it's like they're doing everything legally in terms of accounts, but they're like adding
it points towards
fluffing
something
invoices
sinister, kind of.
and then embezzling, office space, that
Yeah,
like that kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
yeah.
Or like
Office
rounding,
Space the movie, not
Yeah.
yeah.
rounding pennies up, and then just suddenly that money is like, where did it go? Just
Right.
that really fun kind of thing.
So
And this actually might be a moment to just talk about money laundering, what that is. Again, more for just a general background knowledge of our audience.
yeah.
Money laundering, as I understand it, is when someone is engaged in an activity that is illegal and they can't just take the money they're getting from that.
suddenly
Right.
buy $100,000
And then say, yeah, here.
without being able to explain where.
So what they do is they sort of put that money, they have to find creative ways to get that money into the like stream of legally recognized money.
Right.
So it might be something like you own a business that only operates in cash, and really you only sold $500 worth of stuff today, but you report it as 5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you've got $4,500 in cash. You can just sort of
And on paper, it looks like it's income
Right.
from your business. In reality, it's from another business that's illegal and
Car washes.
So yeah.
We've
Yeah.
all seen Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad.
Yep.
right. And that's basically what that is, right? That's
Right.
money
Yeah.
laundering.
Yes.
And so part of what a forensic accountant might do is
Would be to find something like that.
Try to figure
Notice,
out.
wait a minute, nobody goes to this restaurant, but they're reporting
Right.
$1 million,
Yeah. Yeah.
in income in a year.
So how, I guess if maybe you knew this, you would already be doing it, but how does one become, like, how do you get that gig?
Yeah, I think that you just have to have so many college degrees that I don't have time
Stack
for.
'em up, yeah.
Just stack them up. Like I that's the thing is I really don't even know, because at this point
Huh.
I'm like, well, what am I going to start?
Would
Like,
that
what
kind
does it
of a
matter?
person work for like the government? Like you're working as like a law
Yeah,
enforcement?
So you probably work
capacity?
for one of the big four, which is the accounting firms.
The big four accounting firms.
right? Deloitte. I don't even know the
KPMG.
rest.
a friend of mine
KPMG.
actually just got a job with one of the big four
Yeah.
in Chicago.
I only
So,
know two of them.
one of the-
apparently.
or the IRS.
Sorry to the other two.
Yeah.
Not that anyone from them is probably
Not
listening
you.
to this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So you'd
IRS
have
or
to
the
work for one
FBI.
of these like large.
So IRS, FBI, or one of these gigantic.
There's no
Right.
like freelance forensic
I
accountant.
don't think so.
So what?
Pretty hard niche to break into.
You could be like a vigilante forensic accountant.
Right? Isn't there a Ben Affleck movie about that?
I don't know.
I think there is. It's
Oh.
called The Accountant.
Yeah.
It's like the only
So
time one of your
probably.
people
Right.
got to be like in a position of yeah.
Huh. Now I'm trying to figure out if there's forensic accounting tasks we could come up with that you could do.
I hope so. One
Me
day.
too. We'll have to think about it. Okay.
So the big four, as you called them, I say that like I know that term, but I'm always saying because
Yeah.
the big four.
I don't even know who they are.
Of course,
so.
the big four. So if they hired a forensic accountant, like I can imagine what an FBI, IRS type of person would need that for, but would a big four company like they're investigating?
I
their
think
own
that they would
people to
might
make
just
sure they're-
investigate or just be doing audits to make sure.
Okay, just
There's
to
a
keep
lot of
track and
auditing.
make sure
Yeah.
that like we're not facilitating
Right.
something illegal unknowingly or something.
Could you also give us a decently technical professional definition of what an audit actually is? I imagine that's another term people hear and don't actually know what it
Yeah.
means.
So it is a corroboration of all the data that you yourself as a citizen or business have put forth to the taxation entities like the IRS or whatever your state board might be, to make sure that that's not fake, essentially.
So you're being asked to prove like you made
Prove
these
it
statements
all.
previously,
Right.
and we have some reason
Because,
We
either
have
by
some
random
reason to
selection
believe.
or for some.
sorry, here's another thing that I'm assuming maybe most of our audience doesn't know.
Yeah.
When you submit your taxes, when the average person or corporation or
Yeah.
whatever submits their taxes, this is kind of an interesting thing. No one checks it, like usually.
Usually-
Unless it gets audited, it just gets accepted. They say, okay,
Right.
this is the number we were told they owe. And I think there's some there's some battery of automated checks against.
There's some automated
depending
checks,
on the kind of job you have.
and then if those flag, you are probably thrown into an audit pool. But even from that pool, it's random selection.
And at a certain point, it's just volume of man hours. It's not possible to audit all the people that they maybe would want to audit.
Oh, sure. No, you got to choose your fish.
That's
why if you stay under a certain income level, you're probably never going to get audited.
Because the cost of auditing you would outweigh whatever.
You're going to get $7 in extra taxes because I made a typo. No, you're going to go chase it.
And from their perspective, it's not really their primary concern, I believe, isn't justice or anything. It's not we want to catch the guys who did their taxes wrong. It's just it costs us X dollars to do an audit. We want a good shot at getting more than X dollars out of it. Like it's really purely like a very accountant sounding ledger kind of. If I'm going to send a guy to your house to look into this, I want to make sure he.
And so it's kind of like if we put this into like high school, college terms, it would be almost as though on your midterm or final exam, in addition to submitting the thing, you also told the professor
you said, I got an A.
And the professor was like, yeah, that's probably
professor
good.
Randomly picks a certain selection.
Occasionally
be like, did you really know that much stuff?
Right.
I want to point out also for our listeners that it probably sounds super boring that we're sitting here talking about taxes. But part of the thing, like we were saying earlier, that schools don't teach kids these skills. It's not really discussed or brought up. Once you're an adult, you don't have a choice. Like you have to know and care about taxes. Like you'll realize at a certain point, like if you start making any money, like you have to pay all this stuff. So
literally any amount of money once you
it's not just that we think it's cool and fun, or maybe you do to sit and talk about taxes. Maybe you don't, or whatever. I don't want to speak for you, but this is a thing that is necessarily going to be a part of your life when you're an adult. Like you have
as much as knowing how to drive. Actually, more than knowing
more than that, because you cannot drive and not go to jail, but you can't not do your taxes and not go to jail.
Also, the thing that you mentioned about hauling copper, I'm like vaguely aware of that.
That definitely sounded like one of your guys got carjacked or truck jacked.
Sure, it's happened before. Yeah.
So, what do you give a truckload of copper? What do you do with it? Like
you don't stop. Like you just.
No, I mean if you just got it, if you're the copper
jacker, you're the copper pirate.
I guess there's like black markets.
Actually, you probably have to launder the copper in a sense. Like you got to find some supply that you can sell it to.
So,
you open a fake drive-through, or people pay for cheeseburgers with copper, and then it's probably how it works. I'm going to assume.
So it's a big thing, especially. This was in Arizona. I hope my stomach didn't just get picked up on it. Copper mining is a thing, and it's like all the empty houses. If your house is sitting empty or house is under construction, the wiring gets ripped out.
The wiring. Wow.
And the old plumbing too. Copper pipes.
Old plumbing,
I think I said pipes, but that's how they are. Copper pipes. Old plumbing just.
And so did your company, again, sort of like mundane administrative things, but things that I think our audience is unaware of. Did your company carry insurance for that kind of thing? Like, so say that someone reports that their copper issue.
The truckers have their own insurance, yes, but we did have backup insurance in case. But also the people are insured for, like the copper mine would be insured for stuff that happens.
The people themselves who are hiring the truckers.
Yeah, there's insurance everywhere. But
so a part of the cost then of transporting this copper is everyone involved has insurance for when the copper.
It's like being a doctor, like malpractice insurance. You have to have like a certain level of coverage.
Wow.
For copper heists. I did not know we were going to talk about that.
Are there other?
Is there anything else?
Were there other things?
We're talking about the career paths, and we just want to put out that copper heisting is a valid career path for anybody.
A lot of money.
If you're taking on the risk.
As a copper pirate, which is what I've decided to call them.
That's a much better
copper pirates.
Wow. All right. So, thank you for explaining that. What did you do from the time that you dropped out of school until where we've picked up on your story? So
dropped out of high school?
Sorry, dropped out of high school.
Dropped out of so many things.
Right. I've given up on everything, basically, at some point.
Your first attempt at dropping out.
So let's see. I dropped out of high school.
How did that go over with your family?
It was not great. So, I mean, my mom has a master's degree. You know, she really values education, and
can I ask in what?
She is a CFO. I don't know. It's an MBA, I guess.
Huh.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll call it an MBA.
Do you think that your interest in like analytical thinking and numbers and stuff is in any way derived from her influence, or
probably both? My parents are very analytical.
Well, I don't know. Pry about this. I was going to ask earlier, you said that your parents went through multiple bankruptcies.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask before if you thought witnessing that kind of help develop this sense that you have of like not wanting to be in that position, and maybe that's why.
Right. I do think that it contributes to my extreme love for doing for clients forecasting and budgeting work. Like, okay, sure, let's take care of the money you have right now, but also, are you going to have money in the future?
Because now money is great, but future money.
Right. Also, that's essentially just the core problem of bankruptcy is you're like, oh, I'm good.
Plan for it.
Oops, and now you're screwed.
Wow. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Could you also explain again to our audience and to me how, like, I have a vague understanding of how bankruptcy works and how a person or a company could have more than one, in their history.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, just as they would assume, that the government always checks your taxes when you submit them, but that's not true. I think they would assume bankruptcy is sort of an end of your financial life forever. How does it actually work?
I mean,
what are the?
It kind of is in that your credit is destroyed. So especially if you go through two of them, you're basically starting from scratch twice. But if you just rack up too much debt and you cannot pay it, there's a point where you just have to be like, well, I'm just never getting out of this. Let me ask the courts to wipe this away. And
so it's a decision that you make as like, this is my option at this point.
Right.
Like instead of trying to just keep making these payments that I'm not making.
Right. I'm not going to be able to ever get out from under this. Then you say, hey, please wipe this out.
And the court, I guess, has to evaluate your situation and decide whether whether
they agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just, if they think, a lot of people do unfortunately try to use bankruptcy as just like, oh, let me go buy 80,000 fancy cars and then write it off.
Bankruptcy.
And they think that they're going to get to keep the car. That's not how that works.
Could you even just keep one? Because it might still be worth it.
You get nothing and your credit is trash.
That's a great example of something that should be taught to teenagers.
Right.
You don't keep the cars if you do that. Yeah.
So, I mean, but it is kind of a game changer in that you're officially moved to like, now you really have to operate on a cash basis. And that's something that in personal finance, everybody should be doing anyway. But in this kind of leveraged world, we're all really not, and
can you describe operating on a cash basis as
I don't use credit cards if you can't pay them off every single month.
Right.
Don't finance that car unless don't finance cars. They're a depreciating asset. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
And
there.
so, and when you mention leverage in this case would be the idea that you don't have enough money now to buy a car, let's say, but somebody will give you
credit. Yeah.
Right. So you could pay a couple $100, have the car, and then over time you're going to pay much more than you would have paid
much more
up front, but you don't have to have it up front. You can just sort of, and that's leverage.
And then people just get too deep in that, and then you're buried and you can't get out from under it.
Yeah. So you've described yourself as analytical and kind of attributed your facility with money and accounting to that characteristic.
Yeah.
You also said that you think both of your parents were pretty analytical.
They're analytical, and I feel like
they
had these problems maybe coming from a place where, like, my whole family has been relatively poor.
Okay.
Going back to as far as we can. Like all my grandparents.
You mean like generations?
If they were too poor to keep the records, you mean? No.
Yeah.
We sold the records years ago. So.
And so I feel like, I don't know if you've heard of this poverty mindset, but something even I still struggle with. And now I'm in an okay position. But when my parents, Dad, if you're listening, I'm totally like projecting here. I'm just like making claims I think might be true.
Okay.
Once you get a little bit of money, like I have to spend it all right now because it's going to be gone.
Somebody's never going to get knock on my door and like say it's theirs or something.
That mindset that's a very real thing.
Right.
And it's an interesting, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. If you grew up with that mindset, until you hear you say that it's a mindset, you might not have even realized that's a mindset.
Yeah.
And if you grew up without it, listening to you say that, those people are like, you're insane. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But it really is how you grow up one way or the other. I mean, not only those two, but
it comes into play in our household because my husband grew up pretty loaded. His dad's an orthopedic surgeon.
There you go.
And when I just like, should we go buy this thing because it's on sale and we might need it? He's like, what are you talking about?
Great. There's a different way to think about that.
I'm just like,
yeah, and it's interesting because I think there's and this again, it's a broad statement, it doesn't apply to everyone, but I think there's very much a perception that people who grew up with money would be the ones who'd be more inclined to spend it,
right?
Which can be true certainly in some environments, but it can also be the exact opposite, where because
in my experience, it's been the opposite.
If you grew up with people who were fiscally responsible and everything like that, then they don't have the mindset necessarily of this is on sale, let's go buy it. Whereas
they're just automatically responsible all the time. And boring.
Which, looking back, might be how over generations they became that way.
Yeah. And again, to be clear, this is huge generalization. I definitely anecdotally have seen it in action, but there's the opposite. There are people.
We're talking in broad strokes here.
Right.
And then spend it on everything.
Wow. So when your parents went through these bankruptcies when you were younger, did you know it?
I feel like I didn't know about the first one because I was probably pretty young. The second one, I think I was in my teens and I had a better idea.
Did you have an opinion on it? Was it just a thing that was happening?
Not really. Again, I was a really bad teen, so like I wasn't really the most engaged. But I think that once I hit like having to take care of my own money, it's like, well, I don't want to do this. Like this is bad. I know enough to know
personal
that
bankruptcies that they declared, not business.
Right.
For even extra background, were they entrepreneurs in any way? Did they have regular jobs?
Yeah. So my mom has always worked for people. She's never been entrepreneurial. My dad had his own tiling business. And so I guess freelancing. I mean, he didn't really have employees besides his kids during the summer,
So do you also know how to like tile something?
Yeah, I can throw down some tile for sure.
Wow.
That's good.
What have we not asked about yet? You can do.
What else can you do?
Yeah.
Some stuff.
I think. Sometimes there's things I just straight up forget about. And then the kids will be like,
I can do this. Yeah.
See, where have I worked?
Well, you mentioned rock climbing, so you're.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a job. I'm just.
Well, but it's a skill. If you're an action hero, like, come on,
I'm hoping.
Tile rock climb. Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
Steal this truck. Can you, if you're repossessing a truck?
I can drive a truck, yes.
Well,
wow.
That's awesome. Are you legally, could you, quote unquote, steal it if it belongs to you? Like, if you're repossessing it, do you have to confront the person? Like, if, hypothetically, let's say
you have to notify the local authorities that this is happening.
Yeah. Okay. So hypothetically.
You have a pretty wide degree of leeway once that's done, right?
Right.
If you caught them at a gas station and they went inside and left it running, can you just hop in and drive it away?
Sure can, and we've done some much shadier things than that.
Did you have a copy of the key already, or they have all the keys?
Do you retain a copy? I guess that would make sense. Did they send you out with the key, or you had to get their key from
this one? This guy was just evading us forever, and we finally no, you need to bring the truck in. Like, we got to get new tags on it. And they went to the bathroom, and I'm like, there's the keys in my pocket. Like, no, it's mine. And that was all it took. But we were trying to get this guy in for 6 months.
I guess that makes sense. If you have the key and he doesn't have another key, you have the truck now.
Right. Now
you
it's
can't
my
do
truck.
anything.
Yeah.
So.
And then the cops are there being like, okay, now we can leave. This is our truck now. So.
Did anyone ever trash the truck when they knew that you were trying to take it back?
I mean, I don't know if they did it purposely, but there's definitely trucks that weren't working. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We found one hidden in the depths of Manhattan, just backed into an alley and covered with boxes.
That's honestly, that's like Jason, but that's impressive.
And how did you find it?
Because we had GPS on it, but we go out there and
all I see is this semi-sized
must be
literally nothing here. This is just an alley full of boxes.
Wow.
And so we had to go out about 3 days in a row.
That is really impressive.
Finally, somebody sneezed in a box fell over.
Wow. I wonder if, you said, you got pregnant and left that side of things.
Yeah.
If it weren't for that, would you have just had a career?
It was extremely fun, but I'm not really.
Did you ever feel like you were in danger? Did anyone ever try to physically confront you?
I mean, there are some. I don't know. I don't want to make a sweeping generalization about long haul truckers, but I'm going to let you fill in the blanks.
You can describe your own.
Yeah, they could be pretty threatening for sure. I don't really.
And in response to that, do you? Cool. You say you don't ever fear a person?
No, I'm not a fear-based person.
Okay.
It doesn't work on me.
You're able to kind of.
That's not something that has ever really worked for me.
Yeah, it sounds like
that's very interesting.
Except for my first night in this house, all the sounds were new, and I was like, "There's somebody in here." That was the only time.
The ghost of a trucker from years ago.
I knew I'd catch you.
I've tracked you down. Yeah, you shouldn't have tweeted so much.
So how did you then move from director of ops to
I'm trying to remember
those other roles?
Ops,
but I think that
ops does sound like
it's like you've got goggles and you're coming up out of
maybe I was just I was kind of doing double time because they're all in the same building, and I just got so good at the repo stuff and even the house management stuff that I was like,
Were there other employees who were involved in multiple arms as well at the same time?
No, I was the only one.
You're kind of like the X Factor.
I guess I was a jack of all trades person there, willing to do any fun, ridiculous thing that they gave me that day.
Make some dude cry. I'll do that.
Yeah. It was terrible. I probably had a lot of anger or something.
Were you at that point, were you living on your own or were you still living with your parents?
No, I was living on my own. I moved out at 17. We just did not get along. And that was a terrible teen. It's like, no, through no fault of my parents. My parents are great and we're great now. We're great friends now that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And my stupid choices, they're not responsible for. But as a teenager, I was terrible and I moved out.
When did you decide to drop out? Have you ever regretted dropping out? Honestly, I don't know if I would if I were you. I don't know.
It sounds like you're doing it right.
It's really hard because I have kids now and I want them to stay the course, if not just because you just can't quit and run from everything in life, which was very much my MO at the time. But also it's hard for them to understand because we're doing okay.
Yeah, it worked out all right. So what do you, did they throw that in your face?
Like, a little, yeah. No, I'm like, Taylor, you could get a scholarship and go to college for free. He's like, okay, why do I need to go to college? And I'm like, I generally agree, but if it's free, go, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Also, if you're in college, you can live here. So, it's a motivator. And it should be nice for my kids to not have to immediately start hustling just to stay alive like I kind of had to through my own stupid choices, but still.
Yeah,
sure.
Like I moved out at 17. I was like, well, now I need money immediately.
Yeah. So
sorry. So was it when you were...
hijacked my copper. Go on. The truck you got heisted.
So was it when you were 17 that you became a secretary at this place? Or
no.
That was earlier,
in between, this is definitely have to be edited, but I also feel like I have to be honest.
Please.
So I went to being a stripper like almost immediately. And
wow, that is a whole other career path you didn't mention until then.
I don't know. What should I say? So I worked at a bar for a while. This is the lie part. But
wait, is this the part that we're not cutting out?
I'm going to give you a lie so that you don't have a hole there.
Do you want to ask the question again?
Yeah.
Do we? I have to say, first of all, I don't have any negative view of what you.
I think we don't care. I can imagine that you would care.
But I don't care. Like my kids, I don't care, but I don't. If this is about kids, I don't.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm just trying to figure out.
Are we going to be one of those podcasts where do we keep this in?
And then it's an eventuality.
Right.
Considered. Yeah. How should we? I could just go back and not answer.
It's your choice. I
do want to know personally, but I will go back.
I mean,
I'll just say.
I feel like our whole deal is first and foremost, if you care, we can just cut it out. That's all I cut out. Okay.
No, everybody knows.
If you don't care, I mean, I feel like our whole thing is we're trying to be
direct,
upfront, and open. This is what it was like.
Yeah,
this person.
So now, do we leave in this discussion?
Leave it in? Well, they're going to know if we did.
If you're hearing
this moment, what if this is a ruse? And we're like, well, we need to have a discussion to cover the real truth with assassin or something.
Right.
Yes.
Did you already plan to do that when you dropped out, or you dropped?
No,
this is my move. I'm going to make.
No, it was like I need money. What ways can you make money literally that day?
So you dropped out. So dropping out coincided with going out on your own, leaving.
Yeah, I mean, my mom graciously let me stay a little bit longer, but I was still being a jerk. And
did you decide I'm leaving, or did they say you need to leave?
No, my mom kicked me out.
Okay.
Yeah. And
did she feel like you were a negative influence on the family dynamic?
No, I think my little sister was too young to really be affected by that. And it was just doing stupid things like stealing her car.
Yeah.
And getting caught, not even being good at it,
Which is funny because you would eventually go on to steal much larger things professionally.
The strangest thing is that I lived in Arizona for 3 years and I did, my first 3 years of high school there. And I was a great student. I was in honors classes. I was doing AP classes. Then we moved to Maryland and for my senior year, and the credit system there was such that I had been taking honors classes, but in order to get my degree, I had to be relegated to freshman classes as a senior. And I immediately became the most bored person ever. And I just stopped going to school.
So you were doing well up until that point?
I was
if you had never moved.
If I had never moved, I would have finished
that whole period with
my senior year in Apollo with having college credits. Everything in my life can be blamed on the Maryland school system.
Whoa.
So,
whoa.
This is give us a minute to just absorb this development. This is like
but a few seconds.
Like a made for TV movie kind of like, this is exciting.
So, okay.
So later in life, you ended up in Maryland to take care of your mom because she was sick.
I moved there once for just 2 years.
Maryland,
right?
Previously for high school, or not for high school.
I moved back, so I lived
dropped
there.
Out of high school and came back to Arizona.
Yeah. Right.
On your own, and your family had moved away at that point, so it was just you in Arizona. You didn't have siblings, parents, anybody there.
Yeah.
So that was just like I was happy in Arizona.
Yeah, like all my friends are there. I know it, and I hate the cold.
So you just got like a bus ticket or something, or
I got a one-way plane ticket. Yeah.
Wow. With your own money that you just had like enough to do that?
That was it. That was like all the money.
That was it.
Yeah. I called my friends like, I have to live on your couch. This is the last $215 for this ticket.
So were you living with friends who were still in high school?
No, they were.
At this point, were they graduated? They were older kids.
Graduated,
anyway? So they were kids you knew in high school who were older grades, and now they're graduated. Were they in college? Were they working? What were they doing?
They were working random job. Yeah, it was like 4 people in a 2-bedroom. It was like rough.
So it was one house with like several of these people that you knew.
Yeah.
Wow. It's funny because the irony. Well, it's not funny. It's ironic that you could have almost had that fairy tale high school ending of like having your senior year back in Arizona, except you weren't in that mindset, I guess.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that you were doing well.
I was doing great.
And then
that's crazy.
So you were bored? Like that was at the time, is that like, if we had asked you then, would you say I'm bored? Or would you be like, I miss my friends?
No, I didn't care. I'm a loner. I mean, I had friends, but
no fear, no friends, no nothing.
I'm fine being alone.
And but it was just you were in these classes where you were relearning stuff you already knew.
Yeah, thanks. I know how the reproductive system works.
Yeah.
Well, and so I just stopped going, and then I didn't go for 3 weeks, but the school wasn't able to reach my mom because I was smart enough to not give them her number. So
you could have been like a real, like, I don't know, like underworld sort of, whatever the secret agent.
Crime boss? No.
Yeah, somebody for like the bad guys. Like you could have.
Like an assassin.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you were thinking ahead at a young age.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do a lot of bad stuff, so I'm not going to give you any of the context.
Right. So why would
my parents? Yeah.
I don't know if I knew that I planned it, but yeah, subconsciously.
That's a weird kind of responsibility that you.
I would like get up, pretend that I was going to school, and then just go sit at the McDonald's until my mom went to work, and then I'd go home and go back to bed because I had been all night partying. I snuck out my face.
This was also a time before like everyone had a home security camera.
Oh yeah, right.
No. So I think you've mentioned not today that you had a lot of siblings, right?
Yeah.
So were any of your other siblings having a similar? Did they have any?
No,
adjustment issues or whatever you would call it?
I think that I was like the black sheep model, and my dad cracked down on me so hard that it scared the rest of the children into submission, which is nice.
So were you the oldest then? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wow.
Everybody else was relatively good. My twin brothers, who are 18 months younger than I am, they did like some stupid things like breaking into schools in the middle of the night, but no real damage.
No, like lasting.
Nothing bad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was right. What's the next question? What do you think about the SATs?
I thought we would sit here and just talk about like accounting.
Yeah.
Which would have been very interesting. Yeah. And we have a
whole other thing. But so up until I think you've pretty much said this, but I want to drive it home and clarify it for myself. Up until that moment where you moved, there was nothing really to indicate that you were going to have this sort of like left turn or whatever, this abrupt turn off from the
not really
normal quote unquote path of go to high school, go to college, do whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if college would have been in the plan just because.
Did your parents go to college, or you said your mom had?
My mom got her late.
That was later on.
Yeah, she went back to school later, and my dad went to college for a little bit, but I think he dropped out probably just for financial reasons. Like even back in what had that been, the 80s, it was too much for him.
Yeah.
So, and then he went into manual labor and stuck with it.
So when you were this model student, like to me, if I were going to go to AP, I mean, I did go to AP classes, but I did it with the idea that, okay, I'm going to go to college. Like it just sort of was an automatic thing. Were you just doing it for the challenge of it, or because it was?
I didn't even know what AP meant at the time. They just put me there because honors was not just.
Wow.
I don't know. It sounds stupid.
This goes to so much like.
Honors was not what?
Like the honors class wasn't hard enough for me.
So you were doing well enough
So AP was just
you should get
the hardest thing available.
Right. It was the next hardest thing.
Did you approach them and say, I feel like this is too easy? Or they saw that your grades
I think the teachers back then were a lot better.
They were paying more attention and they thought that you
who's an engaged child and who's getting A+ without ever doing an ounce of homework, Were
there certain subjects that you were into?
Science, I was really good in biology, and
like you liked it, you enjoyed the
I love I love that. Math, I think I was pretty good.
Has ended up serving you well.
Yeah. I'm
So
definitely not great with the creative stuff. That's a no for me.
Really? That's interesting to me because I don't know. I would have thought of like what we were talking about before with problem solving with the accounting. To me, that is an act of creativity. I mean, it's not like graphic design or sculpture or something, but I mean, it's a thing where there are given rules and constraints and you have to sort of figure out on your own, like a new way to do a thing.
Yeah. I think that the rules and constraints helps, like I have a guideline. If you just hand me a piece of paper and say like, draw something beautiful,
I see what you mean.
I can't, I need those rules and constraints.
Sure. In 1 minute.
Guidelines
It's interesting. Like you need the rules. I mean, I don't just mean you, anyone, myself included. I think a lot of people, you need the rules because finding the holes in the rules is the creative thing. Like if there's no rule, if
it's wide open, find the variable.
Then what are you?
Right. If everything's a variable, then
there's nothing to work on.
Anything's so. Sorry, when you said the AP thing and not even knowing what it meant, that really like resonated with me so much of. And if you're sitting in the audience and you are in high school or college and you're wondering if I'm saying this directly to you, I am. I don't even know you. I promise. Like this is a thing you need to be aware of. So much of the decision making, it's not even always decision making. So much of what happens to a person at that age. Well, not only at that age, but anyway, like so much of what happens is down to a lack of knowledge. If someone had said to you, AP stands for advanced placement, it's this part of this.
Like you're getting credit for college.
It's designed to be like, and if you don't plan to go to college, then this is really not even worth your time. Something like that.
Yeah.
That would have probably changed at least how you thought about it, especially you being so, like you said, a little bit having like the seed of defiance in you, but looking for ways to optimize things, ways to.
If I had known that I could take AP classes and they would feel to me like a regular class, I probably would have doubled down and been in an entirely different position.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I just didn't know what that meant at all.
Right.
I didn't even know what the A and the P stood for.
Right. And so much of that.
So the teacher never said like, this will be on the test that you'll take and like, sort of direccking it toward like.
I didn't know that there were things at the end of the class.
Because there's tests in other classes. Like, why would you? This will be on the AP. Okay. What is that?
I had no idea.
Wow.
So much too, though, of what I hope this podcast will help people with and what your, training could do if you do train younger people on taxes and finances and so much of that stuff. It's not that people are deliberately keeping secrets from those who come behind them.
Right.
It's that adults often don't recognize that a younger person doesn't know it.
Right.
Or somehow it seems fitting to them. Well, why would you learn taxes when you're in high school? And,
right, exactly. In some way,
if somebody told me about taxes, that would have been really helpful.
Yeah, and it's just sort of a blind spot more than a deliberate decision to keep people down or keep them ignorant or keep them whatever.
There's nothing, there's nothing malignant about it. It's just really just a lack of understanding that a child who's 17 literally has to do taxes next year. Why aren't these seniors learning about this?
Yeah. And another important lesson there for our listeners is don't assume that just because some adult hasn't brought something up that it must not be important. There's something going on and you think this seems important, but nobody's telling you. Like go with the impulse that it seems important.
Most of the time it's the opposite.
Investigate it at least enough to determine for yourself that you think it's important or not. But so many things.
And especially with the change of pace today in technology, like there's a ton of stuff I'm sure that teenagers kind of see coming and are aware of and might think, that's something you should be talking about this.
Yeah.
But wait, none of the adults I know are mentioning it, so it's probably not a big deal. Like, there's a decent chance that you might have a better perspective on that. And
I was on a road trip with the kids once, and like we spent 10 hours from here to Alabama talking about predatory lending.
You do.
This is a useful use of my trip,
you need to know this. Yeah.
Predatory lending, by the way, could you explain to our audience?
So just ridiculous interest rates, taking advantage of the fact that people think they need this thing, in a city
going after people who aren't savvy enough to realize that I'm getting a bad deal, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially this happens a lot on cars. And this was the topic because my son has high hopes of like his first car is going to be some $40,000. Like, okay.
Full of Skittles.
Let's do some math. on how much you're going to make working at Publix
right.
next year. So he's like, can I just get a loan? I'm like, no. Yeah, it's a lot of, you don't even know what they don't know.
Yeah, sure. And they don't know what they don't know.
Right. So they don't know to ask. You don't know to say it. So why don't we just get something in place that covers all the bases?
Yeah.
If we can. Because you see a lot of it, people get their first credit card in the mail and are like, oh, yeah, this is free money.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah. So I don't know.
I'm also trying to, sorry, the AP thing is like still. I'm trying to put myself in the position of a guidance counselor or a teacher or something, at your school at that time. I think I would have just assumed, like, if someone comes into, when I was teaching SAT classes, like in person, if someone is sitting in the class, I assume that they're taking the SAT and they want to go to college.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, like, by the way, you don't need to be sitting.
You wouldn't stop and explain what the SAT was to these people because you would make that assumption. Yeah.
That's such a great example not the SAT thing, but the AP thing is such a great example of how.
Yeah. A friend of mine
not spelled out all the
high school was involved in a million, extracurricular things and would have done well enough on the PSAT, which is funny. Do you know what that is? You were in high school, so you remember it? PSAT is like
kind of,
sort of. Its only real purpose, besides just giving you an idea of how you might do on the SAT, is to see if people qualify for like a national merit scholarship.
Have you heard of like a national merit scholarship? What that is?
I've heard of it.
It's like a pretty, relatively big.
We happen to both have been.
We did.
I mean,
if you got,
I'm not kidding.
Mark got
amazing.
the Bright Futures thing.
Nice.
So,
So Bright Futures is an in-state scholarship.
Yeah. So it would have been a big deal for my friend to do this, and he had been like running himself ragged, just involved in all. He was in theater and he was in all this stuff, and his mom, observing this, was like, oh, he needs like a rest. He needs like just an easy day or something. So she turned off his alarm the morning of the PSAT for real, not knowing and not having any idea that it was happening. He knew it was happening, but he didn't, I think, understand what it would have meant for him potentially.
Because in Florida, where this happened,
it only counts your 11th grade year. This one time,
right? And if he had gotten the score on it that he normally got, because in our school you took it 9th and 10th grade to like get ready for it. When you took it in 11th grade, that would count. If he had just done in 11th grade what he had already done in 10th grade.
He already made the cut last year.
Right. He would have definitely made the cut, would have gotten, therefore,
at the time,
school.
It was a $5,000 a year scholarship
above
at Florida. For a lot of schools, it was a lot of different things. But I mean, it was a significant thing. And it was just, nobody directly said to him, like, I only probably knew because, I was on the youngest one and I knew Mike had gotten.
Now that you mentioned it, the day we took it, I don't think I knew we were taking it. I don't remember.
And just how crazy is that? Yeah, it's a similar thing. Like this
I think that a huge what deal. I've heard, because we have addressed this with our younger kids, where they're not doing the PSATs, but they're doing whatever the Florida standards are.
Some FCAT.
They try really hard to make it low pressure on the kids.
Sure.
But at what expense? If it's the PSATs,
especially as they progress.
If they want $5,000 to be there on time.
Yeah. Well, especially in the case of your friend.
Yeah.
Who was as close to a lock on that as you could possibly.
Oh, yeah. Somebody who for sure would have gotten
because he had already done it.
And it's just,
Right.
God.
There's just like fine line between too much pressure and like just enough information.
And also provide basic info about what's happening.
Sorry, it's just something that we see over and over again in a variety of guises. And I didn't know what AP meant. No one told me. It's like, it's one of the most.
Because it totally adjusts like your floor of like what you assume.
I wish I could say.
And also because of the school that we went to, it was a magnet school. It was very focused on that sort of thing. So, and also our mom was super involved in school related stuff and finding out about all of that. And I had two brothers who went there before me. So,
well, and also it's already been clear to me, obviously, that you're an extremely intelligent person, but if you could do really well in an AP class without even knowing what it meant, like there was a ton of potential there academically.
Right. It's kind of a bummer. I mean, I don't regret my life, but just look back and be like, oh, if I had known that I was smart, would I have applied myself differently and not waste a few years doing
or have the opportunity to be in a school or, where you'd be appropriately challenged and
who knows what,
and understand the ways that you could benefit if you applied yourself to the level that you were capable of doing it.
Right. But it was just not something that anybody in my family ever thought about. My parents didn't go to college at the time.
Sure.
So they didn't think.
And as you said, it's not malicious. It's just, it doesn't occur to us to do this. We maybe don't know. We don't know that you don't know. It's like a sitcom where you're observing as a third party that people are failing to communicate.
Like, how in every
how did that ever happen? In
every sitcom, there's that scene where the two characters are talking about totally different things, but they're having a conversation and each one thinks the other one is.
And then the moment at the end is they realize in a sitcom it's funny, and in real life it's real life.
It turns out
kind of
when everything comes together.
It turns out so much worse for so many people.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bummer.
And it does feel, sometimes it's not avoidable, but a lot of times it seems like it's at least mitigatable, if not totally avoidable.
Jeez.
And I hope that we can teach people some of this stuff, right? So they can not have this problem. And a theme that came up actually a couple interviews ago and has now is just that willingness to say, like, I don't know how this works. And I'm going to ask somebody and see if they do. And unfortunately, you're not guaranteed to have a guidance counselor who's going to be engaged. And, sometimes you have one who's awesome and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it's somewhere in the middle. So it's not like, oh, just ask a question and you're guaranteed to be fine. But it's a good first step, like to mention to a teacher or mention to somebody, hey, I'd like to do this, or is it possible to get college credit, or what is going to happen if I
have a guidance
do this or
counselor.
don't that. Well,
there you
yes,
go.
that is difficult.
But I also feel like the trajectory of your life, and not only yours, obviously, but we're talking to you right now, so yours. So the trajectory of your life shows that if you have that relentless curiosity, like you mentioned, and a desire to work hard and help people solve problems and do those kinds of things, it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a robust way of looking at life. And no matter what kinds of, or I shouldn't say no matter, but there's a lot of things that can happen in those early days that if you keep sticking to these principles and, how can I help people? How can I solve problems? How can I ask questions? You do eventually lead yourself at some points to,
right.
Do you know what I mean?
You will find an opportunity.
I didn't phrase that well, but
it's rich with opportunity, and not in the traditional way, but just as long as you stay curious, you're always going to find something fun.
Yeah. And I think too, and this is something that came up a couple interviews ago in the similar sort of context, the most immediately available opportunity that you might kind of have to go for might not be a good one.
Right.
But part of it is take whatever you have to do right now. And then continue kind of keeping, it's not that something great is going to fall in your lap right off the bat.
Well, when you became the secretary of that company, I'm sure you didn't anticipate eventually you'd be the director. I
really did not. Yeah. Right? I'm going to say I didn't. Yeah. I'm definitely not a good model for don't leave, don't have short histories on your resume. Like my resume is 8 pages long. I don't even write it anymore.
You don't need to. You've earned the right not to do it.
Mentioned also the idea of one of your first gigs, I think, in Maryland being for a nonprofit agency.
Yeah.
Could you describe for our listeners what a nonprofit is, how that's distinct from other kinds of corporations, or is it technically a corporation? I don't know. Organization.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's a 501c3, like
501c3,
corporation, right?
It's got a C in there.
Yeah.
The C is the part of the tax code that
maybe it's
like
named after a corporation.
Subsection C. Okay. Anyway, so yes. Well, anyway, it's going to make a stupid law school dropout.
Nonprofits.
Yeah.
So
what
they are an organization where, at the end of the day, the goal of the company is not to make money in profit. That is not to say there will not be money coming in. It's just that it is not used to line the pockets of the owners. So it's either kept in the business for improvements or given back to the chair, like whatever cause they're associated with.
In a nonprofit, can the directors or leadership of the nonprofit draw a salary from the nonprofit and still call it a nonprofit?
So yeah, people do get salaries. It's just an expense. But at the end of the very bottom of the line item, if you should have no money left over, you need to be spending.
So there's a cap somewhere on, like if you are the head of it, would you call that person the CEO if you're the head of a nonprofit?
Yeah.
So I assume, is it the case that person, if you make more than X, you can't call yourself a nonprofit anymore, or is there some loophole? Not that I'm trying.
A lot of nonprofits, the CEOs make a ton of money.
I thought I'd heard that.
It's just more that it's not the people directly who are counted. It's the organization as a whole. So sure, you could bring in $1 million in revenue, pay your CEO $500,000, but you got to spend that $500,000 on something else. The remaining.
So the justification for being a nonprofit isn't necessarily a cap on what you're paying any particular person in the organization.
Right.
It's that you have to pay out a certain amount toward charitable causes.
Yeah, it's just that you just can't be accruing money.
Yeah.
You know? There's no shareholders. There's nobody who is trying to make you do things in order to turn an actual profit. Revenue being different from profit.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we definitely had money coming in, but it was also leaving. And it was also never enough.
And you were a volunteer, you said, right? This was
I got paid for that.
Oh, that's something else I was thinking. Maybe you were a volunteer.
Volunteer EMT. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe.
What was the, I don't know, like if you can identify the group or not, but like what kinds of activities was the nonprofit?
Yeah, it was a Carroll County childcare. It was for low income child.
Oh, that's right. You said that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Heavily subsidized childcare. So subsidized by the county, subsidized by donors, subsidized by fundraising activities that we did. And
so your organization didn't provide childcare; they paid for childcare for.
We had a child care center.
Oh, you did. Okay,
but the costs of running that far.
Okay, so you had your own one. Instead of taking payment for it, you raised funds. Okay.
We took half payment and then found the money for the rest. And my mom was on the board of directors there too, and was a grant writer, so she's great at finding money.
What was your experience like there? Like looking back on it, how'd you describe it?
There wasn't a lot to it. I mean, it was pretty much my job was just the transactional kind of stuff.
Did you feel like you were doing good work, or were you frustrated that, you wanted X to happen, but Y kept happening, that sort of thing? Or did you get satisfaction out of the work you were doing?
It actually kind of made you see like, okay, we are doing this great thing. Daycare anywhere else would be 4 times the cost, and these parents need to go to work, but also, how expensive daycare is. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, it kind of made me pessimistic in that, like, we're only making a tiny dent in the families in this county.
You're addressing a problem for these people, but like there's so much more.
And it was kind of just like, you think you should feel good, but you kind of just feel bad because you're not doing enough.
Right. You're helping,
right?
But that makes you aware of how much more help is needed,
right? And
you can't possibly do it all.
Yeah. I mean, that was the hard part for everybody who worked there, I think.
Sure. Did people in that group, agency, company, whatever, did they tend to stay on for a long time, like the other employees? It was a labor of love for them?
Yeah, it was very much. They definitely weren't paid very competitively. The people who worked in the daycare themselves were very invested in these kids and just helping them get to be, if not through their parents, like a place where they could be better.
Sure.
In a better position.
Wow.
You mentioned dropping out of school, 17, leaving home, back to Arizona. And so the job that you mentioned there was being a stripper. And then 23, I think, was the secretary job.
Yeah.
So there's the gap in between. So
the gap in between was I got married at 18 and had a kid. And then I was doing the work from home. I don't want to say just a stay-at-home mom. It's a serious amount of work.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, that's what I did. And then
what were you? You said you were working from home also? Or?
No, I was just
not working from home.
Yeah, at the house. Yeah, with a child who never stopped crying. Yeah, so it was rough. Then my husband and I split up, and I was I need money.
Yeah,
He went to jail, so I needed money really urgently. Like, wasn't like I'm getting child support now. It's like
right.
I'm on my own.
This is the guy with the web development thing later?
No, I've been married a lot. I'm great at 2 things: careers and relationships.
Sorry. It's a very funny way to say no. Yeah. Okay. So
So he went to jail for driving with alcohol. I don't drink.
DUI, DWI. Different.
But it was not his first in Arizona. They take it very seriously. Okay. So he got thrown in jail, and Taylor, my son, and I were just like we're doing this alone now.
Yeah.
So I took the secretary job.
How long was he in jail?
That time was only 11 months, but that was not his last one either. Like, he had alcoholism.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So stay-at-home mom up until that point.
Yeah.
And then
secretary.
This was still in Arizona?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you got a job then, like, as you said, you urgently needed some kind of work.
Right.
You answered an ad or something for.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
I think that I just looked on Craigslist or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you went in for that interview, or whatever the process was for the secretary job, what was it about you, do you think, that they saw and responded to positively? And how did you present yourself after having, like we talked about, a gap in the resume?
Yeah, that was really intimidating to be like, well, I have accomplished nothing, and the best I can do is keep a child alive. But let me be the face of your company, because it was not only the secretary, but literally the first thing you see when you walked in the door.
Sure.
is me. And it was very intimidating to get a job after so many years of not having one. But I wish I could ask them what they saw in me. I hope it was just like a willingness to be like, I will do that and I will learn how. And I'm a generally nice person. So
that does matter.
Yeah.
I can't say that they had like high hopes for a secretary position that had a whole bunch of requirements, but I'm sure there was probably people more qualified, and hopefully I was just cheap enough that they said yes.
So your resume at that point was effectively blank.
Yeah, I mean, because I didn't put I was a stripper. Like, I didn't put that on there.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I guess the interview must have been the big thing, probably.
I guess so.
The impression that you made.
I don't know. Shockingly, people thought I was worth having around. So.
Well, I mean, you speak extremely clearly. You use advanced vocabulary terms,
kind of like intangible things of just like
right.
presenting a good. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about that also. Do you think that came from your period of time, like when academics was going really well, that you just sort of absorbed those kinds of?
Maybe I also read a lot.
That way of speaking, yeah.
I read a lot of books, and
just your whole childhood.
Just my entire childhood was just reading. Like I'm reading, Centennial at 11, and reading, which is like 1,000 pages.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, James Missioner. Centennial.
I don't know what it is.
I was reading horror, like Stephen King.
Gore. That's right. That's
So I read a lot, and I picked up the words, and sometimes I still say them wrong because the mark of a reader is that you never hear somebody say it. So you're just like, oh, I'm going to order some horse divorce, you just have no idea. But I read a lot, so I don't know. I always try to hang out with people smarter than me too.
That's really interesting. Yeah. What genres? I mean, you mentioned horror and so on. Has it always been kind of limited to that sort of thing, or do you have a wide ranging?
I really enjoy it. Like anytime I get a notification that Stephen King wrote a new book, I'm pre-ordering it. Like that's a must for me. But I don't read a lot of fiction besides that. I read a lot of like self-improvement, like especially business recently, as I kind of had to commit to my business or get off the pot, I guess.
Sure.
So I read a lot of that.
Do you have any particular like business related book that you feel like was especially useful, or might be, I guess it might not be geared toward possibly like teenagers or college students who might be thinking.
So one that I think has been the most helpful in business for me, even though I wouldn't say it's really business oriented, is called Code of the Extraordinary Mind. And it's really just kind of an affirmation that you don't have to do things in this linear way. It's okay to like think differently, and please do in fact think differently. And here's some ways to kind of like reframe.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I don't know. I'm a big West Wing fan. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
I have a few episodes.
But Toby, who is the communications director for the president on the show, has this kind of saying, which is, don't like answer the question from the press. Reject the premise of the question. Which is like,
you don't have to be bound by what someone else is.
I don't have to be bound by that. I reject the premise of like your whole
good try.
And it's like basically my entire life motto. So.
Reject the premise.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I don't think you've rejected any of our premises so far.
Well, I think we're in agreement on a lot of on the ridiculousness of most premises.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
If you did, it was so subtle.
Yeah, well noticed. Do you have any concrete like, one day I'd like to have 1,000 clients and some people under me to handle them, or I'd like to get into this other area?
Sorry, you mean in the accounting life?
Yeah, just whatever. From a professional standpoint, is there some, you'd like to get your business to a certain point, or you're considering some other path entirely? Like, do you have a vision of where you'd like to be down the road?
I'm still working on my vision because I only recently reached a point where it was something I could even consider besides just the day in and day out slog of like, well, this like, let's keep paying the bills.
Yeah.
I don't want to quit this business. I feel like, and mostly because of the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Like I've been doing
mostly for a bad reason.
So the sunk cost fallacy will expand. I don't think we have to say what it is now, but it's basically
you might as well. I mean,
okay. In this time that I'm saying we're not going to say what it is.
It's like more time.
But for the audience, it is the idea that once you have invested your energy or your money or your time in something, that you should continue it until it's finished, no matter what happens between when you started working on it and when it's ultimately finished. And the problem with that can be sometimes you invest, say, $1 million in something, and you could stop at that point and you've lost your $1 million, and that's bad. but you don't want to stop then. So you spend another $5 million over the next 6 years and you still can't get it to work. And when you eventually have to just cut ties completely and say, okay, this isn't working,
you've way more of a disaster than it would have.
Yeah, you've lost much more than you would have lost if you just stopped.
You shouldn't try to justify things not working, or you shouldn't try to justify all the effort you put into something already by continuing down that path if it's clear.
Or a really good example would be to say, okay, I've already bought tickets to a movie next week. I paid $20 for that. Because I paid $20 for those movie tickets, I have to go see that movie. Even if I decide later on that I actually don't really care about the movie or another opportunity comes up, and then I'm going to spend the time to go see the movie and the money on the gas and all of that, to drive out and see the movie. Those are all extra costs because I committed to buying the tickets earlier. Whether I spend those extra costs or not, I'm not getting the money back from what I already spent. I didn't describe that well. And that's why we should talk about it afterwards.
I think that even harder is that for me, it's kind of like an emotional sunk cost.
Of course.
And
for sure.
if it was numbers, I'm an accountant, I would be like, this is a loss by.
Right.
Yeah. But putting your life energy into something
10
and walking
years
away
of
from it.
trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And it has worked. And I think that's why it's harder for me to ever think about cutting and running, because if 100% means, let's just use an example of selling my accounting agency, I'm at 60. So it's a lot harder to just say, why not go the 40?
Sure.
Than to start over with something fresh. But do I see myself doing this forever? I'd be shocked. I really would. It's just.
So you think one possible exit for you that you would be to be in a position to sell the company at some point?
And when you say that you would be shocked, I think from this conversation, I have an idea why you might be shocked, but can you tell me why you would be shocked?
I get bored very easily. And
that's going to be my guess.
I feel like in everything I do, I reach a point where I feel like I've kind of helped as much as I can help, and I do feel like that's especially true for professional services, where if I'm not willing to go get my CFP or my CPA, if I'm not willing to do that,
limited by
I'm
certifications
capped by
and
knowledge
that sort of thing.
and how much I can help.
So in theory, you probably could do more, but legally or practically, you have to have these pieces of paper that say that you're.
And that would also kind of add to the sunk cost.
Yeah.
If you invest the time to get that degree or either of those certifications or whatever, it's kind of only useful in this domain.
Right.
It's not like you can turn around and go.
Then you don't want to do it only because you've been doing things like that for a while.
And I found myself in this actually just maybe in June. I was like, should I go back to school and actually get all this stuff on paper? And then it's but why? I don't, I'm doing fine. It's not necessary. And I don't want to do this forever. So why do that? So I don't know. I don't know what will happen. Hopefully I'm just rich and get to sit on my patio.
That would be something.
So, but I think I'd get bored of that.
Bored of that.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way to sit on this patio.
So it sounds like you don't have your eye on any particular
I don't.
trade or anything.
I wish I could say I feel like this is what I will do, but I really don't know. And I do have a lot of interest personally in helping kids understand personal finance, but I feel like there's a window on that where right now I can still be a coolish, authority figure that they can relate to. But when I'm 45 or 50, that might
you hurdle rapidly towards
I can tell. I know. It's well, I really better do this now.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you're 50, you'll seem cool to 35-year-olds.
Right. You don't need my help anymore.
That I feel like you're an interesting case, certainly for our listeners, because I think a lot of our listeners, as mentioned earlier, are terrified of not even just what if I don't get a college degree, what if I don't get a degree from the right college? It's as narrow as I can't be successful, not only if I, but it has to be this particular major, this degree from this school, or I'm never going to have X, Y, and Z happen. And so you don't even have any college degree. You don't even have a high school degree. And, you've demonstrated the element that you did have or still have is this determination to be useful, solve problems, be engaged with what you're doing. And, it's hard to present a broad lesson for everybody, and it's not going to be the same for every person, but it seems like the key factor for you was that attitude that you brought to whatever you were doing, as opposed to, I think for a lot of our listeners, the feeling is if you don't have these pieces of paper, you've got no chance. And it certainly is helpful to have them in certain situations. It's not like you should never do them and you should only drop out of high school and follow this path. I mean, that can, but it's important to understand that there's so many paths, and obviously yours is very different from what
the thing you could do to nail down anything is just care. Like, and that means not only care about what you're doing, whatever that may be, care enough to like be thoughtful about it.
The way that I think about it is sort of like, it's a funny thing to say, but like when you're doing, it's like pretend like it matters to you. like pretend like this is super important.
Yeah,
exactly.
Really good way to
act like this is something that will
pretend that if it goes badly, you will feel like you will.
And if you pretend that enough, you'll start to actually get the feeling. Hopefully, you're in a situation where your bosses will reward that.
I naturally have that, so I'm not faking it till I make it on that particular item. I like get overly invested, and I have so many opinions. As like all my clients' business, I treat it like it's my own, and I get really invested like that. But even if you do have to fake it, I think that if that's a situation you're in where you need the job,
that can be how.
That's the difference between you and like some jerk who's got 8 degrees. But comes in like
can't be bothered.
To
get involved.
So what I was going to say before that slipped my mind, you mentioned when we were talking about what your next act might be, that you work with a lot of companies. And one thing that I've always found interesting in times that I've worked with, clients from different companies, you see a lot, in that kind of capacity. You've seen so many types of businesses sort of up close and personal in a way that I think the average person, doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that still with that range, nothing jumps out at you as.
I feel like if I stay working in any kind of service for other companies, it will kind of be more in like a coach and advisor role, because that is a good portion of my job now, whether unintentionally or intentionally. The things that business owners stress out about is money. Almost exclusively. So if you're their money counterpart, they're coming to you like, oh my God, I'm freaked out. I'm stressed. Am I going to be able to make payroll? And in that, you kind of just become like somebody for them to sometimes vent to, but also for you to be able to step into
like a counselor
role. There's a lot of just therapy happening. And like sometimes the situation is out of anybody's control and you got to let it play out and it's going to suck.
Yeah.
And just working through that with the business owners.
But even hearing someone say,
sit on my couch and we'll pet you through it. Yeah.
And tell me if this is not accurate, but it's not all that consulting ever is, but what you just described would fall under the umbrella of consulting, right?
Yeah.
Which is another term I used to hear a lot. I remember in high school and college, I had no idea what it really meant.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So this would be a type of consulting.
Yeah.
And you could almost argue that what you're doing now is a type of consulting. Couldn't you, or not really?
No, I definitely
is consulting.
Yeah. That's consulting.
Right. For some of my packages, like it is a line item. Like we're literally just talking about it and seeing what happens. And for sure. I don't know. Consulting is a general term for an intangible.
It's kind of a catch-all.
Yeah.
Right.
We're paying you to give us advice on something.
Yeah, and to have insights, maybe, and experience, and possibly connections that we wouldn't have otherwise. So that's why
that would be a great next path. I would love to just get paid to sprout opinions just everywhere.
Me too.
That's what I want.
That does sound really good. So could you take us through, in as much detail as you feel comfortable, could you take us through like what an average day for you
like what is right now, like in your current
right now in the current iteration of this agency, it is a lot more doing for me personally than I think that is ideal. So
like your own personal day-to-day involvement is greater than what you'd like it to be.
I'm in a spot where I'm have enough revenue to grow, but I don't have the time to train people.
Yeah.
So it's really tough.
Could I interrupt you for 1 second? I feel like, and it kind of goes back to the other side of something we've mentioned a couple of times. I feel like a lot of younger people don't. I feel so old when I refer to, but they are young. A lot of you youngins out there don't recognize or don't realize how hard it is to find a talented, interested
which
person
is the other end.
That's what I'm saying. Who's going to act like they care, who's going to show up on time, who's going to invest some energy. That's really hard to find.
And the impression you can make, like you apparently did in an interview, where you come through as
I bet that's a large part of why that comes.
Is asking questions. Like, how does
this is
work?
A person who's intelligent and is going to work really hard at the secretary task. So I just wanted to point that out while you are mentioning that you specifically are having this problem
it's
right now.
It's very hard.
You have the money to hire somebody
yourself when
you want to hire somebody
or something.
I want another me, and of course that's impossible because unless you kind of give somebody that kind of financial compensation
like
or ownership. It's hard for them to want ownership. At the same time, I don't want to give that away. It's like you're stuck in this vicious cycle of nobody can get it done. So my day is usually between consulting meetings, probably half my day is meetings, and the other half is either designing my delegation out for the next week or doing the things that my team can't do.
That you can't.
Yeah, it's kind of like just me, which is the higher level stuff like forecasting and budgeting.
What do your meetings like? Do you have to physically go to a place?
Yeah, just phone calls or are they in person?
Yeah, I do Zoom chats, like video chats. Yeah, I don't. Almost none of yours. My only local clients, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, wow. Check us out.
I'm honored. Yeah.
So that's working from home in your office somewhere?
Yeah, I'm home today, so we didn't have to go far, but either my office in downtown Tampa or from the couch.
And we, I think actually Patrick is the one who found you, so I don't know.
I am.
That wasn't through Twitter, right?
It was from Gusto.
So
payroll partner. Yeah.
Okay, so it was. Yeah, I was going to say. So now, how do you attract clients? Is it word of mouth? Is it?
Let's see. I've been doing a big email campaign that's working really well.
Oh,
nice.
Cool. I don't know. Is it ethical to buy lists? Because I did, but I mean, if they sell them on Fiverr, it's got to be ethical.
I have to
right?
say we never did that, but just because if anyone's asking,
I think it's the sort of thing that
people who are on
can be shady or can be not shady.
Yeah, but I mean, why not? Yeah,
right. Just direct outreach to owners of businesses who might be like,
well, those lists in particular, I think, are like captured, and it's kind of public information how you would email the head of a company,
Yeah, right. It's like we can find your information, so I'm just having somebody do it for me, and that's been really good.
You mentioned that you got the list that way. Did you then write your own email?
Yeah, I wrote an email and I sent a video with it because I feel like people just engage with videos.
Yeah, for sure.
And you made those things on your own?
Yeah.
Like you didn't get, okay, cool.
Right. I am bootstrapping it, I guess. Sometimes I do AMAs too. So
oh, really?
I haven't done one on Reddit, but I've done one. Where else? I do like Facebook AMAs for certain groups in certain industries. I'll be like, hey, you want me to, like, your people look really confused.
Yeah.
Let me help out. So I just open up office hours for a day and people can book their own 15 to 30 minute call. And just, I feel like the more you can just provide value, whether they're paying you or not, when they are ready to pay you, they're going to come back and think of this person who helped them. No questions asked. So I try to do that. I value like kind of open sourcing knowledge as much as possible. Which is a fine line because at some point, like you need to get paid.
Yeah. Right. You can do both, but it's you got to figure out the right way.
An interesting benefit of that too, I think, is it exposes like you as the accountant or the consultant or whatever, like you get to see way more stuff because you're bringing all these people in.
I mean, there's definitely a selfish part of it, which is like, this is content, I guess.
Yeah.
I haven't had the wherewithal to actually write any of that, but I see the potential. And that's all that matters.
I know it's there.
Yeah,
and just connecting with lots of people really.
Yeah. I mean, on average, my clients stay with me for like 4.5 years. So right now I don't have to do a lot of marketing.
That's cool.
It's pretty nice.
Do you find that when that relationship ends, like, is there a common thing of like they need a bigger agency? So
this is the goal. Like, if one of the goals for your business is to outgrow me, like, let's set that up from the start. And everything we do is going to be about getting you there, A, financially, but B, so that we have the processes set up to hand it off to somebody better. It's like we celebrate it. Like, sure, I'm losing the money from you, but it's like a graduation.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Now you need somebody in your office all the time.
So they would go to like an in-house person?
Probably,
generally? Have you ever been offered or tempted to be that in-house person for somebody, or is that not really
I've been tempted, but I have priced myself out of that market pretty largely. So
But you mentioned this idea we all have of being engaged and trying really hard and all of that. Absolutely. On a more like tactical level, what advice would you give to people who might be considering whether to apply to college, what kinds of programs to go into, whether accounting is something that they're into, whether insuring long haul copper drivers is something they're interested in? Like, how would a person who has listened to your vast experience, and I'm sure a part of it can resonate with a lot of people, how would such a person then say, oh, I'd like to learn more about this, or I'd like to take a next step relating to one of these things?
So this is very hard because I feel like my answer is practical. And I wonder what you think about it. I don't really believe in the do what you love thing. I'm sorry. Like, I like to grow plants and nobody's going to pay me money to do that. So I don't feel like that's great advice, but something that you have an aptitude for and can tolerate is a pretty good start. I do think that people need to be practical in considering things like job security. Trades are really good. And I think that more people should be pushing trade school and not looking down on it like it's some kind of backup option.
A compromise or a failure or something.
I mean, there's plenty of electricians out there making way more than I do.
And air conditioning guys, plumbers.
Killing it. So I feel like that's really good. Plus, you can grow those too. So you can go from being a trade to being a business owner.
True.
Yeah. I don't know about college because I didn't really go. But I think that when I think about advising my kids on this first, that's really stressful because you're like, I'm going to tell you this thing that A, I don't know anything about personally. B, if you get it wrong, you just potentially spend a ton of money, whether yours or scholarship money, it's still money gone for something you might not ever use again. So it's really hard to know like what the right answer is.
Sure.
And it's such a huge choice so early in your, it's basically kicking off your adulthood by making or not making this
it's a terrible thing.
So commitment.
I wish there were more like general education kind of degrees that you're then put on hold until you decide what you want the other 2 years to be spent on. You know?
That's a really interesting point, and this is a good moment maybe to mention there always have been a lot of ways to do college and higher education, but they're becoming more and more common. And it's becoming, like, statistically, if you look at the whole population of people going to college, university, whatever, it's becoming less and less common that you stick with one thing and 4 years later you're out and then you have an idea what to do next. So this idea of, like you said, maybe do a couple of years, get some exposure to some ideas, some industries, some schools of thought that you find interesting, and then go try to find a job with that and see what you think and then come back. That's becoming more popular. It isn't really like a defined path at a lot of places, but it is something that a fair number of people do. You also are seeing way more internships, externships, like all of that kind of stuff being sort of worked in. And so, I would agree. Like, one of the biggest problems to me, frankly, is when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 40, like you don't know what you want to do. So how are you? And even if you think you know, there's a very good chance
to prepare
that's going to change.
Difficult.
Right. So this idea, this kind of like iterative, work on this for a while in school. If you really like that, then go try to get a job with it, see what you think about the job, then come back. Where we talked in another interview in the medical field, it's a very common thing to shadow a doctor. And you just like go follow a doctor around for a few days or however long. And you actually see up front, this is what it's like to be a doctor. I wish that existed for everyone.
That's such a huge, valuable,
it would be such
experience.
There are so many, when I was in law school, I am positive, given the conversations that I had, most of the students, myself included, did not actually know what
life was like.
What was your day going to be like, as an attorney? And many of them adapted and love it, and that's fine.
But it's not going in.
But it's not what you see on TV. It wasn't like the TV shows. It wasn't, there's just so many possibilities that are out there. And if you don't grow up having a family friend or something who's like in a particular field, I can say with a high degree of certainty, your idea of that field, whatever field it is not correct. It's different on a day-to-day level than what you probably, think that it is. So I like what you said about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. If colleges moved to a situation where the first things that you taught were things like logic, problem solving.
Sure.
And I don't really know how those would be taught. It's hard to quantify like what is logic.
Yeah.
But if you tackled those things instead of be like, now you need to learn algebra.
Right.
It would take people a lot farther.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because there's universal things that apply to every job. And then if you're set up to have those, you can decide later.
It's funny because what you just described is the like classical, like,
I was going to say,
the
that's what
education, liberal arts, like it's supposed to be that.
Academics.
But that's not what it is anymore. Yeah. It should be the case. I fully agree personally. It should be the case that at some point you're learning all these like background ideas, which can then be molded to any situation. Right. And there are for sure some schools and some students who, that's basically what ends up happening for them. But for the vast majority of people, right, as you can tell by the fact that, you said it like it's a new idea. It kind of is. It shouldn't be.
Right. But my first year of college was not those classes. It was math and social studies.
Right.
Just
it's like high school 2.0.
My jobs. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, that was nursing school?
Well, that was like the first. Yeah, it was like mixed in. You have to do the basics.
So when you
I didn't even get through the basics.
School, it was just like gen ed, basically general education.
Right.
Huh, I didn't even realize that would be
like a thing.
Part of that. I thought it would. Yeah. Huh.
Well, it's kind of like I know you just kind of mentioned this obliquely, but like what, as concretely as possible, what do you think you will say to your own kids?
I will say
this:
learn coding. Don't go to college.
Yeah,
that'd be my answer right now.
And that's
coding
a lot of reason to
software.
I mean, software engineering. My husband is a software engineer.
Sure.
He dropped out of college because his success in that was like, this isn't worth it anymore. And now I'm doing this. And my son is like learning Java in high school right now. And I'm like, yes, keep teaching these awesome things because
like not on his own, but actually in high school.
Yeah, in his classes. Wow. Last year he did 3D modeling, which is a little more artistic than his flavor. This year he's learning, like just learn a language, start there.
And, coding language.
Yeah, programming language. And it'll take you far. It's the job security of the future.
When you mention like learning that and not going to college, how would you do that? I have an idea myself, but for our listeners who might think you have to go to college to learn that.
You don't. And I would even argue, just from what I know, Mark being on the board of directors at Gainesville in the computer department, the curriculum is dated, largely wildly out of date.
That's that was my impression, but
you're going to learn a lot more on the free resources like Khan Academy and I don't know, all the other ones, but you can learn so much. And a lot of what you learn is just go pick something and break it and then fix it.
Well, and that's an interesting thing too. You can learn so much from a software standpoint. You can also build your own stuff to a degree that really isn't possible in other fields. Like if you wanted to be an industrial engineer, you can't really build your own factory system and see what happens to it. But you could build your own whatever software thing.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think a lot of people who would see coding as like this sort of personality dependent, like it's for some people, it's not for other people. Like you have 4 kids, you think you would give the same advice probably to all 4, or like
yes.
Well, you did mention like you kind of have to be practical.
I do. I mean, my daughter, my son is like INTJ. My daughter is like extrovert.
Yeah,
creative.
These are personality types.
Yeah, the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
She is creative, always drawing, and I still made her go to Code Academy, Iron Yard, and St. Pete because these are fundamentals. Like it's what typing was in the 60s.
Sure.
You know, and if you
skill everybody.
You have to know how people talk to.
So whether you're creative or not creative, or you consider yourself to be some aspect of what you do is going to touch on computers and being involved in that.
And,
This is I give people that advice a lot, even when they say I want to be an occupational therapist or I want to be like things where you might think that you could get away with never having to use a machine.
Yeah.
That's not going to last.
It's not.
At some point, a machine is going to be heavily involved in some way. And by machine, I mean software system, robot, possibly something like any kind of.
And at some point, automated. Like they can't take care of themselves, so your job is to now take care of them or program them,
or to use them in some kind of way.
I remember this will show how old we are. When the internet started to be like a common thing that you would, seeing a commercial for Doritos. And at the end of it, it's like, go to Doritos.com. And I remember thinking, why would Doritos have a website? Like, what is the connection between food? But just to show, like, it used to not be obvious that any food product would have its own website. Right. And in a similar way, it might not be obvious that an occupational therapist would have to have some connection to the computer world. But I think in the same kind of way, it's moving in that direction. Everything is somehow going to be connected.
Even in accounting, that. I mean, I in a very rough term, do programming with like spreadsheets. And, it's all the same. Yeah. You're not going to get away from it if you want to be considered for any job ever.
Well, on that topic, what types of technology do you use? Can you talk about like an accounting stack? Is that a thing? Like what are the software?
Right. So we use QuickBooks Online. We use Gusto for payroll. Nice. I mean, they process the payroll, but just their user interface is so beautiful and their team is so competent at keeping all the tech stuff in line.
Have you thought about working for an organization like that? I guess that's not really, sorry, I'm jumping.
Yeah, I mean,
we were talking about like
I've thought about it for sure. I've seen people in my thing kind of go, that's their next step. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just
right. Really and then I use Float for forecasting, and all these things are cloud-based. And I think the best part about it for me is not really that it gives me information, but it makes it easier for my clients to turn, boring accountant speak into something they can see, something that translates for them. Like for Float, it turns it into a beautiful visual graph of the day you're going to run out of money.
Is that in their marketing?
It should be. It's like a line I use off.
Yeah.
So that's what I use. I know a lot of other stuff, but those are my preferred things. I feel like it's a huge problem in the accounting industry that a lot of CPAs are not keeping up with the cool tech options that we have. And
so you would say business accountants are doing that generally more from what you see, but CPAs are not?
Well, no, just any business accountant, CPA or otherwise, they're just not keeping up. And there's a huge hole as more and more businesses are internet-based.
Sure.
They're not understanding how their clients make money, receive money, move money around, send money out.
Yeah.
And it just leads to a lot of frustrated conversations. And then that's when they come looking for somebody like me.
Honestly, that was what I expected when I was looking for an accountant.
Yeah, I was just
super happy to find you. I was like, this seems different.
When you're imagining maybe hiring someone else, do you expect them to know how to use these pieces of technology, or you're going to train them? What do you want?
In my dream world, they would know. So I think I have to either get right with paying somebody more or get right with training them.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an internal battle I'm waging every single day.
Did you learn to use these pieces of software just by doing it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just taught myself.
And you would expect,
played around and broke things.
Sure. Yeah. Right. You would expect hopefully that an employee might also be able to pick it up on their own, or?
Yeah, I would expect somebody has, it's really hard because you want to walk these fine lines of not being exclusionary. And a lot of people don't have the resources in their younger adult years to have a computer that's capable of this stuff, which is really just like a MacBook at this point.
Yeah.
But also just have the tech savvy to understand, even if you have to learn the software specifically, like how to just click around and mess things up.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to, as a business owner, I have to remember to build in the time when I hire them that I don't expect them to be super productive right away, which is a fault I've definitely had.
There's a curve, and in the beginning, you're wasting. You're not wasting time.
If you need them to be productive on day one, you've waited too long to hire. And that's a huge problem for me.
Yeah. Well, I see we are running up against the time thing. This was
awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
I hope fantastic. Somebody gets some value out of it.
I can assure you that
people would.
Yeah, this was super informative, entertaining.
And also we should do this again in 10 years and see whatever you've
see how many more
making next.
I don't know who our account's going to be then if you've gone into something else, but we'll figure that out at the time.
I guess so.
I'm giving you 4 years notice.
Okay.
All right. We can work around that.
I think you'll agree that a lot of different topics just came up in that discussion.
Yes.
With Bree.
More than we counted on.
Right. I thought we were going to sit down and talk about accounting. And,
we did. It was in there. It's easy to overlook it with all the other big ticket items.
Exactly. And there's several things I would really like to call out specifically because, and again, this was not, intentional, not anything that we knew about beforehand, but really a lot of what she said, I think resonates on a lot of levels with many of the clients that we've had, even though obviously most of the clients that we've dealt with and most of the people who write us emails and things like that are not people who would consider themselves poor academically or are not people who are planning, not to go to college or to drop out of high school, because obviously if that's your plan, you don't take a standardized test and talk to people who help you do the whole standardized testing in college thing. But, when Bree talked about not being a good teenager and not getting along well with her family and having some family issues at home and family financial problems and, feeling the normal path that you could take was just not a thing that she could do.
Yeah.
On some level, I've had probably, 90% of the people that we've ever worked with have mentioned something along those lines. Like, I'm not going to be good enough to get into college.
Yeah.
Everybody else is so much
that
better.
There's some sort of thing everybody else will just default into, and that you, for whatever reason,
you're just not going to be a part
qualified to do that. When really probably the more common thing is, like you said, most people don't think that they're on that path, but they think other people are, but the other people aren't really either.
Sure, exactly.
Generally, like there's sort of the myth of like, oh, there's this thing that everybody kind of falls into, and it might look like that, but everybody has something or multiple somethings going on under the surface.
Sure.
We had no idea of Bree's whole back history until we started talking about it.
Yeah, that was right.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people maybe are worried that they won't get into their top choice college, or they won't get into an Ivy League school, or they won't make their parents proud, or whatever it might be. Here's an example of someone, and there are many, many people like this. Again, it's a large portion.
Different versions of.
Right. But here's an example of someone who not only didn't get into a top choice school, but didn't have a top choice school to try to get into.
Choosing.
Right. It just was on a totally different, by the time that rolled around, on a totally different kind of trajectory with a totally different set of priorities. Just, how can I make enough money to stay alive?
And support a child.
Right. And all of this.
Be on my own.
But because she was so driven, and she said, had such a good analytical mind and was willing to ask questions and try to be just a very competent person at whatever she had to do. She worked her way into, through a very interesting set of careers, and had an increasing level of responsibility to all these different jobs, and is, I think, by any measure, a very successful, reliable, solid person now. And so I just want to say, obviously, I'm not suggesting that anyone out there follow any particular person's life path. This was certainly not like a standard life path to follow. I don't even know that you
and also it's not that she set out to follow this path.
Right, exactly.
You couldn't if you wanted to.
Right.
She didn't do it intentionally.
It was piece by piece.
So one step at a time kind of thing. And that's how life is a lot of times.
A whole bunch of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Nearly everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So no one is saying like do this exactly, but what we are saying is, or what I'm saying, it's a really great example of how, by wanting to be a productive person and do good work and be reliable and be competent and be willing to be resourceful and all of those kinds of things, you can create for yourself a very solid career, and not just a solid
career. Push through difficult situations and come out on the other end better than you might have thought you would. Yeah.
And it's not just a solid career financially, but I mean, Bree is a person who helps people. Who has
just contributing to businesses and helping out. She's helped us, obviously. Yeah, it is interesting. And it's also kind of what we just said, but it's not like once she was at age 19, she was like, oh, by the time I'm 27, I want to be in this one place. And then she pushed through and got there. It was more of like, well, this is going on right now. I have to react. I'm going to do the best I can.
Sure.
And then you kind of see what the next option is that comes up.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be in a situation, whether you're 15 or 35 or whatever, where you don't really know where you hope to come out on the other side of something challenging in front of you, but you try to just look at, what can I do right now? What's with the information I have,
sure.
What's the best step I can take? And it sounds like she did that quite a bit and was able to, maybe it's a combination of like being able to keep your cool and also not having a choice, which kind of, I think, overlaps a lot more than people realize.
Yeah.
Where instead of just freaking out, she took whatever actions, made whatever decisions she had to make. And I think this is funny because you and I, this is our first, I think, episode that was going to get released where we speak with someone who didn't complete college, and it's not going to be our last one.
Yeah.
And I think we both get a little bit like excited when that's part of the story. And I don't want that to come off the wrong way because, as Mike said, we don't think that the right thing for most people is to not go to college. But an example of a person who doesn't go to college, doesn't finish college, it's the perfect counterexample to what we encounter all the time with students who contact us who, as Mike said, they have a certain school and they feel like they have to get into it. And it makes perfect sense. I totally get where that would come from, especially in the high school environment, especially.
And we very frequently have helped people get into those schools that they really want to do.
It's not that that's a bad path. That's not by any means, but it is like the high school experience is much more, generally speaking, more predictable, more like kind of laid out in front of you. Like if you're a freshman, you're probably going to be a sophomore next year and a junior the year after. If you're in, Algebra 1 this year, you're probably going to be in Algebra 2 next year. There's a more of a linearity.
I think that's
is that a word? Linearness.
Or linearness, yeah.
Linitude. That
linearicality.
Linearicality.
Yeah.
There, thank you very much.
Highly linearical.
Yeah, precisely. Whew, that was almost embarrassing. So that is built into the high school experience in a way that it is not built into the post-high school experience very much. So it's not that we're saying, oh, awesome, you didn't go to college, nobody should go to college. Like, it's not that. It's like, great, here's an example where like you are a high school student and you have this kind of pressure, whether it comes from yourself or from your peers or from your family, people who want the best for you, for sure, generally speaking. this pressure can be there, and it can feel like if I don't go down this path, then
my whole life is over.
What chance do I have at being happy? People are going to be not proud of me. They're going to be ashamed of me. All this like kind of snowballing feeling.
All my friends are not having this feeling.
Everybody else is doing great, which of course isn't true, but it's understandable.
But that's
understandable that it feels like it's not true. It feels like it's true. So we get excited when we talk to somebody who didn't go to college at all and is doing well, just to show like, look, like if this person can completely go down their own path, exactly, normal, you can definitely just get into a different school from what you thought and do really well. And you don't need to be, as long as you have that determination to make the best move you can make, according to where the pieces on the board for you right now, as long as you're going to do that, and it's perfectly fine to freak out sometimes and maybe have a moment or a day or a week where you're worried and you don't know what to do. But if you can recover and just do the best you can, that's what most people are doing. And, you're going to go down a path in some way that is not what you expect. For most people, it will include college or something like college. But, if it goes so off the rails that it doesn't, that's not the end of your life by any means at all.
Well, and one interesting thing, I think one commonality among many of the interviews that we've done and just sort of, what you see looking around, talking to people, listening to their life experiences. One thing that Bree does have, and I would say it's, in my opinion, among the most critical things that you find in people who are happy with their careers, is a willingness to get interested in stuff and take ownership of things and try to make things better. We've heard it over and over again in these interviews. And as Bree said in this interview, it's just that so many people around you are so incompetent.
And disinterested.
Yeah, disinterested. I was going to say, I wouldn't even really say incompetent. I think it's that most people, when you get out there in the working world, and they have their reasons for this. It's a very complicated, set of issues. I'm not claiming that we can explore it all in the next 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But most people in most jobs are not doing their best at that job.
They're not engaged.
They're not mentally engaged.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it
might just be a feeling of why would I even be mentally engaged?
Sure.
Why does anybody care about their job?
Right. I mean, there's plenty of jobs I had.
There's people who definitely,
I absolutely get it.
And that is a choice people can make, but you also generally can't really expect that you're not going to climb the corporate ladder, generally speaking. I mean, you might if literally no one else cares either, and it just happens that way, I guess. But, if you want to give yourself the best shot, like there's a connection.
And so that is the thing. If a young person were speaking to me right now and saying, okay, like, maybe I won't get into this college, maybe I won't do whatever. The thing I would say and do say is get interested in stuff, or if you can have that desire with whatever you're doing, whether it's schoolwork or part-time job or whatever it might be, the real skill is to want to do better and to ask questions and to admit when you don't know what's going on and figure out, for example, I am the secretary. Well, I mean, I'm not, but I'm speaking as Bria, as I imagine, okay, I'm the secretary of this company. And in that role, I'm seeing kind of how the company works, secretary of the company, but secretary of the person who runs the company.
Yeah.
And in that role, I'm seeing large parts of how the company works. I'm starting to understand kind of how it all fits together. And then, how can I then take that growing body of knowledge and be useful to the company? And that actually kind of segues into the other major thing that I wanted to talk about. Do you mind if I switch topics for a second?
Go nuts.
Cool. So one of the other things, which I wasn't planning to have come out of this interview, but it's really cool that it did, is just sort of how many companies there are out there, like how many kinds of jobs exist. Just in this one interview, we talked about everything from laying tile to there being like insurance companies that insure long haul truckers, copper shipments, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Secretaries, being director of operations for companies, being an accountant, obviously all of these. The
web design firm, right? She
had a web design firm, absolutely. Forensic accounting is a thing that I already knew existed, but I didn't know it.
Talk about it.
When I was the age of somebody who might be listening to this, I didn't know that was a thing. It's
people hunting down rogue semi truck drivers, whatever. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So, and that's one other thing to sort of keep in mind. Well, kind of two prongs of that. So one is just as a general statement, if you can find yourself working in a relatively small company and or like a family owned, kind of company where maybe the culture of the company is a bit more informal, if you're into it, you probably can learn a lot of different aspects of what goes on in that company and broaden your awareness and your skill set more than you might have thought when you're looking for jobs or whatever. You might not realize that that's a big advantage. If you're looking for that, it's a big advantage.
Well, we talked about that actually. This is another interview we haven't released yet, so stay tuned, everybody. Right. But we speak to a restaurant owner in a later episode who kind of talks about that. And if you're going to work in the restaurant world, there's like the more corporate types of locations where everything is a lot more rigid. And then there's the more mom and pop kind of places where you might have a little flexibility. And it's a very kind of personality based thing. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, like, do I want to be with like a mom and pop operation? Do I not? Well, it's really just as simple as like, do you kind of have a gut feeling of like, oh, that'd be cool. I'd like to be involved in that. Or I don't like that. Right. It can be that simple. And if you don't know either way, then, you know, you might be in a situation where you're able to find out and you find out. So it's not like you don't have to know right now if one is more suited to you than the other, but this is an interesting
and I think
aspect of that to keep in mind.
A lot of people who might be in high school or college, or just people who may be older than that even, but who've always had sort of like large company, corporate sort of jobs, they might not be aware of the fact that if you're thinking about working in a small company, one possibly good thing, if you like that, is you can maybe learn a bunch of different aspects of it. And so again, that's the one prong is small companies and or family-owned companies can be a good way to get that type of experience kind of in a sideways sort of way. The other prong of that I wanted to reiterate is right now, again, if you're in that sort of late teens to mid 20s kind of age range, I can just about promise you there's exponentially more types of jobs in the world than you are currently aware of.
Yeah.
And in this conversation, we touched on many of them. Oh, brokers is another huge thing I totally forgot about.
So, I was thinking, because you're kind of building up to that point.
Yeah.
Here's interesting little food for thought for our listeners here to kind of put this in perspective. It is entirely possible, if not likely, that you will spend some large portion of your life, maybe most of your working life, doing a job that you literally don't even know about right now.
Yeah, for two reasons.
If you're sitting here, because it might not exist yet, it might be an emerging job with changing technology and that sort of thing, or it could just be a part of the economy or the whatever is going on in our world that you just haven't encountered yet because you just haven't. There's so much out there. It kind of brings some uncertainty to like a full stop where you're sitting here thinking, oh, should I do this or should I do that? Or should it be this thing or that thing or whatever? The right answer might literally be like a vocabulary term that you have never even encountered. Right. So sitting around wondering about it might not, I don't know. To me, it gives a little bit of like serenity, a little bit of like, it might be that I don't even know this.
And this is for a different conversation than now, obviously, but it kind of gets into a case of then what is the best overriding strategy, which we'll talk about later maybe.
And we're also kind of this whole experiment or this whole thing with the podcast is approaching that. Well,
sure.
Let's look at all these people's different experiences.
But it's just to get back to what Bree was talking about and what we can take away from this discussion, again, totally apart from her actual life and accounting and all of those kinds of things, is just, I want to start planting this seed for our listeners. There's tons of jobs out there, and the vast majority of them are things where people who are like 2 steps removed from that job don't even know.
Yeah, they don't even think about how that's somebody's whole life is doing X, Y, or Z.
Right. For example, repossessing semi-trucks.
Yeah.
If you didn't know someone who does that, you probably don't know.
Yeah, it was not on my radar or yours, I don't think.
Exactly. And so just that's another huge takeaway from this, and not even getting into the actual things that we sat down to talk with her about.
Yeah.
So along those lines of the things we did sit down to talk with her about, whether you were thinking about going into business for yourself at some point, or maybe possibly even becoming an accountant, or maybe you weren't thinking about it now, but now you realize there's way more to it after listening to this, whether you're in that group of people who might be eventually ever needing to think about accounting or not, I think it's probably still very interesting to you and just sort of useful for building your model of how the world works to know some of the stuff that Bree mentioned here. For example, how audits are decided, like tax audits, that kind of thing is decided, or who's likely to be audited, that kind of stuff, or what an accountant actually does. What is the difference between doing personal accounting for an individual versus business accounting, for a company of a certain size? Also kind of along the lines of that, I thought it was really interesting when she said, well, one of my goals for a lot of the clients, I'm paraphrasing, is to get them to be so big and complex that they don't need me anymore. They go on to like
somebody else who is.
Yeah. So again, even if you're not interested in accounting specifically, you are a person who needs to know how the world works, and a large part of the world involves accounting one way or another.
Yeah.
So, so hopefully this could be useful for that reason, if nothing else.
I would say that a lot of my experience being an adult is
that what you're calling this?
That's what we're going with.
That's the name we're giving to this.
Exactly. A lot of this whole thing right now is being in a new situation that you're not really that comfortable with, but feeling like you should be. So you're going to kind of go with it. And like these sorts of just kind of practical discussions of like accounting and taxes and whatever, you pick up a lot of little bits of information that make those kinds of situations in the future for you lucky listeners, maybe feel a little less foreign and uncomfortable and a little less like you don't have any idea what you should be doing.
Because at some point you're going to have to pay taxes or something. Like at some point you're going to have to confront some version of this. So, another thing that I just wanted to point out, before we close, I almost forgot about this. I can't believe it. The parts of Bree's experience that were sort of more focused around her academic situation in high school, a fair number of the people listening to this are likely to be parents or teachers or guidance counselors or something like that. And if you're not one of those people, then the other half of the people listening to this are people who contact, who deal with those people, the students, children. There's something that Bree sort of alluded to, which we have seen a lot, which was, when she said, I didn't even know what AP meant, actually. And I mentioned it, during the talk at the time too, but if you are in the position of explaining stuff to young people, I'm speaking, to the older people, the mentors. Why can't I ever say that word anymore?
I don't know.
Those people out there, there's a tendency for adults or older people, whatever, to just sort of assume that everything the adult knows about how the world works,
base set of knowledge,
is also something that the child or student knows about how the world works. And that is shockingly not true in a lot of cases. And that's one of the reasons we want to do these podcast episodes, honestly, is to sort of just help start this conversation and help people know things about how the world works and how jobs work that we didn't know when the time would have been super useful to know. And just that we've also seen that other, students and clients just sort of aren't aware of. So if you find yourself in the position of explaining something to a high school or college student, or just being any sort of guidance figure to that person, don't assume that they know how, for example, college debt works. Don't assume that they know how voting works or how, not that they're not intelligent, but they haven't done that before. They haven't confronted it. So, you can't just assume that somebody knows, for example, how to keep the lights on in an apartment or something like that. If they've never been in charge of doing it, there's a good chance they just take for granted that it sort of happens because up until this point in their lives, it's just sort of happened. So why wouldn't you take it?
A lot of the preparation that high school students get is much more connected to academia and much less connected to practical considerations in your life.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the practical side of academia, how much this costs, or whether your credits will transfer or whatever, or just normal life skills.
Sure.
Not to say that high school students don't have life skills, but they're not generally taught them directly
in high school.
In school.
Right. That's not a thing. And that also goes back to something Bree was talking about with like money management and what she called the poverty mindset and those kinds of things. All of that stuff, how you deal with money, how you deal with careers, I shouldn't say all of it, but a lot of it is heavily influenced by your family experience. And so if you come from one set of experiences and you're either being taught by or teaching someone from another set of experiences, you probably assume that they have a lot of things in their background that they don't have. It's stuff that you had in your background. So you think that everyone has it.
And vice versa.
Right, exactly.
The difficult factor or
just an element, an aspect of this kind of
complicating factor. That's there you go. To say in a lot of.
Sorry, I thought you were looking for a synonym for factor, not difficult.
No, what's another word for factor? It's a complicating factor in a lot of just human communication in general. Everybody makes a certain set of assumptions when talking with someone else about something.
And this is also why, just a small mini pitch for our Black books, this is why our books are like hundreds of pages long.
Oh, yeah.
Because people are sometimes like, well, can't you just assume someone knows like SOHCAHTOA? And no, the answer is you can't.
Exactly.
The thing that you assume everybody knows is something that someone else doesn't know.
And there's something that you don't
they're
know.
assuming that you know something that you don't know.
So we try to just get all the information.
And that's why it all has to be spelled out
it all
as clearly as possible.
And we'll get emails from people like, oh, I loved how you talked about this. That was really informative. I never knew that. But this other thing was like, kind of not talking down to me, but like everybody knows that stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, you did.
Somebody else, it's the reverse. Everybody. Yeah, that's why we're trying to get all the.
Yeah, and that's why one of the great things about books is they have pages, and you can just turn. If you don't like the page you're reading, and look at another page. Right, so that's useful too. But yeah, so I just wanted to point this out. Like, here is a person who is highly intelligent, who is very motivated and driven, who reads self-help books like almost obsessively. This person, when she was in school, there just wasn't a connection made between like, here's what you have, here's all of
almost
your
definitely some adult person at her school who could have connected,
who could have just reached out and said, by the way, do you even know like what this is about?
Yeah. Right. Or, hey, none of your credits transferred from your last school and you're about to go down a really difficult, untrodden path here. And let's talk for maybe somebody. I mean, that really blew my mind when she was like, yeah, up until that point, I was an honor student. I was, I was the quiet kid who got good grades and never did whatever. And then
suddenly
went off the deep end. Yeah. Like, what if there had been a teacher who could have cleared up that credits thing in like an afternoon? Maybe there wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds hard to believe that couldn't have been resolved by somebody.
But another thing, too, that I'm sort of learning more and more in my old age. When I was
Twilight years,
right? when I was younger, meaning when I was in high school and college, I was always certainly not the most conscientious student, but I was somebody for whom school came relatively easy, easy enough anyway that I never had to like really break a huge sweat to do anything. And obviously, not everybody in school was lucky in that way. I've since come to understand that part of it really is largely luck, because a lot of like the way school was set up to kind of teach you stuff was also just kind of the way I learned stuff automatically. And that's not how everyone is. But anyway, I had very little sympathy at the time for people who were struggling. We were lucky enough, certainly, to have like a solid family background. And it never entered my mind that someone would be going through these kinds of things. And now, as an adult, as someone who has worked with people in this age group for a long time, and it's not just about like, affluence or socioeconomic anything. It's just family dynamics, medical issues, all kinds of things, can be happening. I was once tutoring a student. Patrick knows the story, but I'll keep it short. Just as one example, she was in another country and some kind of like revolution or riot was like breaking out in the street that she lived in, and she had to go like hide
like dozens of feet away.
Yeah, and I'm not laughing at that's not funny, but I mean,
who would think that there's
if you've never been through that, you wouldn't think that that's a thing that can affect your academic life. Anyway, so again, if you are a parent or student or even just a classmate of someone who seems to be having a difficult time in school, there's all kinds of reasons why it might be happening. It might be a person who is, it's often, in fact, in my experience, is a person who is actually very highly intelligent, would be able certainly to excel in the school, but maybe doesn't even like have the time or hasn't had it explained to them, hey, like you do this and then you do this and then you do this, and that's why it's useful, right? On the flip side of that, by the way, we often have people approaching us about like what their sixth graders should be doing to get ready for college, and the answer for that almost always is nothing. It doesn't really matter. Like at that point, I mean, that's a gross blanket statement. Yeah, but just saying like there's a big disconnect between what types of activities will be rewarded and useful, and who is able to do those activities at a particular time or whatever, and just something to keep in mind no matter what side of that divide you might be on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's rough out there in a lot of different ways.
So that's all for now. If you like the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes or the podcast player of your choice. And of course, if you want to hear more episodes, remember to subscribe as well. You can find our SAT Prep Black Book and ACT Prep Black Book on Amazon.com, and you can find our online video courses on QuestPrep.com. Please tune in for our next episode coming up in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, feel free to reach out to us on our Quest Prep Facebook page or the Quest Prep YouTube channel.
This episode was hosted by myself, Patrick Barrett, and my handsome brother, Mike. No, wait, scratch that. Reverse it. Our guest was Brianna Bond. Every musical element was created and performed by Parker Hale Hastings. The summit of Mount Everest is made of marine limestone, which means it was the ocean floor around 500 million years ago.
And here's that special segment we promised you on the critical reasons why you should only work with official practice questions published by the company that makes the test you're prepping for. So, as we said earlier in the episode, the single most important resource in your test preparation is not a set of preparation materials made by us, unfortunately. Wish that it were. But instead, the single most important thing you actually need is a set of real practice questions from the company that makes your test. So that would be the College Board for the SAT or ACT Inc. if you're taking the ACT. And the reason for this has to do with the fundamental nature of standardized testing. Most people who take the SAT or the ACT never really stop to think about what that fundamental nature is, or what a standardized test is even for, or how the purpose and design of the ACT or the SAT should determine the right strategies to use on those tests. So let's pause for a second and think about those things now. The whole point of a standardized test is to measure the same things every time the test is given, because this consistency allows colleges and universities to have an objective standard that can be applied to all applicants who submit test scores. So if you think about it, a standardized test score is the only objective number that can be part of every student's application, because all the other numbers in the application, like grade point average, class rank, etc., those are all heavily affected by each student's unique school, teachers, and course load. In fact, standardized test scores are so reliable and so consistent that they even allow colleges to track and compare student performance year after year, because a college can rely on the fact that a 27, for example, on the ACT in December 2018 or whatever is roughly the same as a 27 on the ACT in February 2020, and so on. So keep that in mind. The key reason that standardized tests still exist is that they provide a numerical measurement that can be applied consistently across all applicants year after year after year. But here's the thing. If these tests provided that unchanging numerical reference point by just recycling the exact same questions every time the test was given, then that would actually defeat the purpose pretty quickly, because students would figure out what the questions were, and after a while, everybody would know all the right answers in advance before they even took the test. So the testing companies are in a weird position. They have to create a test that somehow measures the same thing every single time it's given year after year to over 1 million test takers each year, but they can't do that by just reusing the same questions, because then everybody would eventually know what the answers to those questions are, and the test would be useless. So the testing companies get around this by making sure that all real test questions follow a strict set of rules or standards. These standards cover all sorts of possible attributes of a test and its questions. So some of the standards are sort of obvious, like the fact that the ACT always has a section called the science section, and the SAT always has a section called the writing and language section. Some standards are a little less obvious, like the fact that the math sections of the SAT and the ACT never require you to know calculus in order to answer a question. And some of the standards are even less obvious than that. You get the idea. So there are tons of these kinds of standards for both the SAT and the ACT, again, ranging from super obvious things to not very obvious at all things. And these standards allow the tests to measure and reward the same underlying skill set over and over again without actually recycling the same questions word for word. Among other things, these hidden standards actually guarantee that the right answer to every single official test question is 100% predictable and consistent with all the other official test questions, even if it might not seem that way to a casual test taker. In fact, as it turns out, most test takers never do realize exactly how strict and consistent those standards are. At most, they might notice that the SAT and the ACT each seem to have like a consistent kind of feel, but they never really go beyond that. But a trained test taker knows that the easiest and most effective way to beat a standardized test is to learn the standards for the test and then exploit the weaknesses that are automatically built into those standards. So this is basically like knowing exactly what's going to be on the test. I mean, you can't know the precise wording or content of a question that will appear on test day, as we just said, but you can know precisely how each question on test day will be built. So you can know what kinds of relationships you'll see between a reading passage and the questions that ask about the passage. You can know what kinds of relationships you'll see among answer choices to each question. And you can know exactly which kinds of answer choices are rewarded and which kinds are punished. On the other hand, if you don't develop a sense of the test's standards, then you're stuck in an uncertain position of just kind of thinking the test is sort of hard and not really knowing what the questions are actually asking or how you should respond to them. And this is the standpoint from which most people take standardized tests. So there's only one way to make sure that you're giving yourself a chance to develop the right instincts in the first place about how the test is actually designed, and that is to practice with official test questions written by the company that makes the test. This is because practice questions written by other companies, including test prep companies, don't have to follow the same standards as the real test questions. The admissions process doesn't rely on fake tests written by third parties. It only relies on real tests written by the testing companies. So if a test from a third-party company isn't reliable, then there will never be any large-scale impact. Nobody will ever know. So we always recommend that you avoid any practice test written by a third-party company. Basically, if a practice test is not written by the same company that makes that test, then it's a fake practice test. Lots of companies do sell books and online courses based on fake practice tests, but those fake practice tests never adhere to all the standards that dictate what can appear on real practice tests. And this is also why we don't write practice questions for you to work with. We only tell you to use official test questions from the companies that make the test, and we only demonstrate our strategies against those official questions. And that way, you know for certain, all of the ideas we teach you in our black books and video courses will be 100% applicable and relevant on test day against the real test. You know that because you've seen them against question after question after question created by the companies that actually make the test. So I'm going to repeat this because it's super important. And for a lot of people, the first time they hear the idea, they're maybe not like totally sure that I actually mean what I'm saying. So I'm going to say it again. If you practice with real test questions from the company that makes the test, then you know that the underlying concepts in those questions and the patterns, relationships, and so on that you're exposed to are the same as what you will see on test day. On the other hand, if you practice with fake questions from any other company besides the company that makes the test, then there's no guarantee that what you're encountering in those fake questions will actually appear on test day. And in fact, we've seen lots of fake questions from major companies that included some details that definitely could never, ever, ever appear on a real test because they violate standards of that real test. And more than that, we've also seen that sometimes major companies fail to include details that will definitely appear on all real tests. So working with fake practice questions means there's a real chance that you'll develop habits and instincts that could actually hurt you on test day. And it also means that you'll miss out on the opportunity to develop the habits that would help you on test day. One very common example of this kind of thing is that fake questions sometimes reward you for interpreting a passage the way that you might interpret a text in a literature class. But the actual SAT and ACT never include questions where finding a right answer depends on literary interpretation. And there are many wrong answer types on both tests that specifically punish you for doing the kind of literary interpretation that would be encouraged and rewarded in most high school and college literature classes. Another example of this kind of thing is that fake questions sometimes require you to know math concepts that don't appear on real SAT or ACT math questions, or they might require you to know science ideas that couldn't appear on the actual ACT science section, or so on and so forth. So if you practice with questions like those, you're giving yourself a distorted view of what can actually appear on test day, and again, that interferes with your ability to prepare in the most effective and efficient way possible. So I strongly advise that you get your hands on some real practice questions as the first step of your training for a standardized test. You can find official practice questions for both the SAT and the ACT for free online, and you can also buy books with official practice tests from the companies that make those tests. We affectionately call the official College Board SAT book the Blue Book, and the official ACT book, the Red Book, for reasons that are super obvious if you've ever seen one of those books, because one is mostly blue and the other one is mostly red. So having access to those real test questions is the only way to give yourself the chance to work out how real test questions actually function, so that on test day, you'll know the unwritten rules to follow and the weaknesses to exploit. And that's key if your goal is to get the highest score possible and avoid wasting your time. Of course, if you'd like somebody to spell out for you exactly what the important unwritten rules are for both the ACT and the SAT, so that you don't have to put your own time and energy into figuring that stuff out on your own, then I would humbly suggest that the second most important resource is either our video course or one of our black books. You see, our entire strategic approach to the SAT and the ACT is based on reverse engineering lots and lots of real official SAT and ACT test questions, and then teaching you only what you actually need to answer every single question confidently and correctly on test day. We show you what these tests actually reward and what they actually punish, which is often very different from what most people would expect. And that's why the vast majority of test takers, teachers, and parents think that the ACT and the SAT are much harder and much less fair than they really are once you know how they actually work. So for more on our books and video courses, head over to questprep.com or search for the ACT Prep Black Book or the SAT Prep Black Book on amazon.com. Thanks.